Good morning, everybody. It is now 9:30, time for the inquiry to resume. Can I just check whether the main parties have received an updated timetable and a brief agenda for this morning?
Yes, we have, Inspector. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Yes.
Good, excellent, thank you. And I just want to check about the parish councils. Is it Councillor Stone? Now, there's the opportunity, as was mentioned, for you to participate in the session on general need, as I think you did last time. Do you wish to take that up? Because if you do, I'm going to invite you to come down to the body of the chamber. Yes. Yeah. Would you like to come down, please? Somewhere where there's a microphone. Just to put you in the picture, Councillor Stern, the reason for this session, although we have discussed the general need for gypsy and traveller accommodation quite some time ago, because of the passage of time and because the council now has a new gypsy and traveller accommodation assessment, we're having this session just to make sure that the latest information is before me when I consider the proposal. In terms of documentation, just a quick update. I've received some correspondence over the last couple of days. The appellants have agreed the site location for sites A and B, so I'm grateful for that. And I also have comments from the appellants on conditions which were suggested by the council. I've got a draft note on the flood risk points that I asked for. I think that is still outstanding from the appellants, though. And one of the documents that was asked for was the tree preservation order, Mr. Lintott. I think I haven't checked to see if that's from the inquiry document section of the library. It may be, but it, yeah. Thank you very much. I'd raised a query last week about the version of the local plan part 2 on the website. That has been addressed now, and it's no longer the draft version. Mr. Masters.
So I was just about to say that I promised you some updated medical
You did, yes.
material, which I suddenly realised I've left on my desk. So I'll make certain it's here for tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Masters.
Yeah, Inspector. So just checking through the inquiry documents as they currently stand, we've added in the documents ID 18, which obviously was the Lawn Lane decision. Tracy Holland is 19. Protect Dunsfold is 20. Site visit plan is 21. The note on approved pitches and caravan numbers is 22. The draft flood risk data is 23, but there isn't a TPO on
Right,
there.
that is still to come.
I know it's around somewhere, and I'll chase that
That's
up.
okay. I think that's all I need to say for the time being. Mr. Cockle.
I have a list of the adults.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
In case
Thank you for
we
reminding
went
me
down
about
the path of the personal condition, but I just needed to check that with my client this morning today to make sure that people I've assumed are married, because they might not be kept their maiden names. So I just need to check the spouse's surnames.
Is your list just for Appeal B, or is it a composite?
Just for PLB.
Right.
So I'm hoping to have a list for you by tomorrow. The person doing it for me is attending today, but it hasn't arrived yet.
Okay. Mr. Cottle, is there anything else you need to raise?
No, other than that, I haven't had time to digest or take in on board the flooding information that's been provided. So as you said, you haven't heard from the appellant on
That's
that.
right. Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Masters, anything you need to raise?
Sorry, no.
No, okay. Mr. Lintold?
No, all good from us. Thank you, Inspector.
Excellent.
I would just like to put down a marker, which is at the end of last week, it did occur to me that there's going to be very little turnaround time on the closing submissions, because I particularly like to accompany you on the site visit to the points looking down on the site as you go up Bramley Path, whatever it is, 367.
Sorry.
And I think that is an important thing that I would like to take on board before I do my closing submissions.
So you'd like to?
Be on the site visit, if I may. So I'm just a
Right.
bit pressed about the timing for the closing submissions. And it's a concern I raised with my own friend, Mr. Lintott, because I would like to digest the evidence before putting pen to paper, given how late it is that we're going to close the evidence of Mr. Woods.
Inspector, I mean, my view on that, and I've taken instructions, is that we feel that your timetable is one that reflects the balance of the need to finish the inquiry when we do, and making sure we have the evidence finished today. So we feel that, especially given the context of this inquiry, it's important that it do close tomorrow
Yes.
and that we read those closings out.
Yes. I hadn't anticipated that, Mr. Cottle. I think at the end of last week, I'd suggested at one point leaving site visits where they were, which was this afternoon. I understood the point you made about the need for preparation for closing submissions. So I hadn't anticipated that you'd want to attend. I mean, that would cause a real difficulty, I think, in terms of closings. Can I? But because I think it's fairly full as it is. But leave that with me.
So I just to have my £2 worth in, the importance is to finish the evidence as far as I can see.
Yes.
If the closing submissions were in writing on a different day, but there is benefit of that because of course there's a very short gap between finishing the evidence and starting closing submissions. So I think I'd support Mr. Cottle's position that perhaps we ought to do closings on a different day and either virtually if you wanted or in writing and exchange them together. I don't think we need to delay that. That could be sometime.
Well, I will give some thought to that, but my preference would be the inquiry has been in person for closing submissions to be dealt with the same way. And although there haven't been great numbers of other parties, there have been other parties present. So I'd be a bit concerned about the suggestion for closing submissions to be in writing, which and not able to be witnessed by other parties. And then even if it's done remotely by Teams or some such means, that still gives me the difficulty in terms of slotting that in. But I'm not going to give a definitive view now, but it's something I hadn't anticipated, and it's not that unusual for there to be a gap facilitated by site visits and then the expectation for closings to follow straight afterwards.
It isn't, sir, but this has been a long case.
Yes.
And I think such a short gap before doing closings, bearing in mind one has to put all the evidence together, it will be very difficult.
Okay. Right. I've noted those comments. Can we then move on to the first of two round tables? And I think I'd like to start essentially with the new GTAA, which came out at the end of last year, and go straight to Mr. Jarman on this for essentially an overview on the approach that's been taken to preparing the GTAA AA. And then obviously I'll give other parties the opportunity to make contributions on that. So in this first session, I'm not looking for the parties' respective position on figures in terms of need or supply, but the approach that's been taken in preparing the GTAA, what components of need have been taken into account, whether everything that everybody considers is relevant is there. So, Mr. Jarman, if I could invite you to deal with that. One thing I just want to check in terms of detail is, well, 2 points actually. The first is the baseline date. I think in paragraph 1.8 of the GTAA, it gives a date of September last year. What I'm not clear about is exactly when. Is it the end of September, the 30th, or the beginning of the month?
Sorry. For the purposes of the monitoring, it would have been the first of the month, so it would fit in with the quarterly monitoring periods.
I'm having a problem with the hearing, actually. I don't have the air conditioning.
Yeah, well, we're all having a problem with hearing, and that has been conveyed to the council. Can I just ask John to do whatever he can to get the air conditioner switched off? Because it's louder today, presumably because it's hotter.
Yeah.
So it's even more of a.
Yeah.
So all we can do, Mr. Giles, everybody else has been told to lean right into the microphone and sort of bellow into it. So if you can sort of do that, put your chair right forward.
Could I just unscrew that and move it closer to me? Right, sorry, to repeat myself there, yeah, the baseline date fits in with the monitoring period. It would actually be the end of September 2025.
The end?
Yes.
The 30th?
Yeah, so you've got April, May, June, July, hang on, April, May, June, July, August, September, yeah. So it would have been the end of September.
Right, thank you. So the baseline date for the assessment is 30th December 2025.
I just remind you, sir, that the inquiry was told that the process of the GTA was put into abeyance by a decision of the local authority, and that the interview process had begun, and that when originally commissioned, Mr. Jarman was envisaging that the report would be published, and you questioned him about this quite closely. Sometime after the autumn began, during the autumn of 2024.
Yes.
And so therefore the data would have been collated in 2024 when it originally started. And the question is how much they went back to those interviews or whether they started afresh.
Mr. Jarman, can you help?
I can. I mean, we're jumping around a little bit now.
Well,
going
I think
into
that's inevitable. Yeah.
Going into more detail, but yeah, when we last convened, I was asked why the GTAA hadn't been completed, and I did give in my supplementary proof in May 2025 a number of valid reasons for this, and the assessment was then completed in December 2025 to allow for the pitch deliverability assessment to be completed, during which an opportunity was taken to review the field work as well. So yes, in answer to your question, Mr. Cottle, there was a review to determine the accuracy of the previous field work, and also there were circumstances where updates were completed during the pitch deliverability assessment visits.
So you say that review took place in December last year.
The assessment was completed in December last year.
But relating to figures that were accurate in September.
Yes. Obviously, once the assessment is finished, it does take time to pull together.
So is it correct? I mean, I put in my need and supply rebuttal at 2.15 at the bottom, that it was confirmed by Mr. Jarman's own evidence that RS were appointed to complete the new GTA for Waveney in February 2024, and originally anticipated that the study will be completed by the end of June 2024, but it's actually taken until December 2025. Well, actually, January 2025, because that's when the document was released, for the report to materialise. With it suggesting the baseline date was September 2025. Now Mr. Jarman is saying, well, actually, they looked at the evidence that they'd already gathered, so it's changing again.
I would disagree with that. The evidence is correct as of September 2025.
My understanding is that irrespective of when the work was done, it relates to the position at the end of September. I think that's what Mr. Jarman's told the inquiry.
And I will stick by my response on that.
My only inquiry was just concern really is that if you interview somebody when you're originally commissioned, by the time it's published, it's nearly 2 years later. And the question is whether you re-interviewed those people that you spoke to at the beginning of 2024, or whether you just count it as safe information when you get to publish it at the end of 2025.
I mean,
You can't have a baseline date of September 2025, but actually it's not really the baseline date, it's some other date. It is or it isn't. And if as Mr. Cottle said, it's based on surveys that are undertaken before that date, well, the baseline date can't be 2025, September 2025.
I disagree, because it's clear in paragraph 322 in the GTAA, the fieldwork period that was used to complete the assessment, and it was an extended period which is accepted as best practice to cover people being away travelling, to cover the breaks for travelling seasons, and it was completed between June 24 and August 25, leading to a baseline in September 25, immediately after the completion and the review of the fieldwork.
Obviously, we want to make progress there, but my record of Mr. Jarman's evidence last time was when originally commissioned, they began the work and then stopped.
Exactly right. That's what I've got, and that was in my rebuttal response when I set that out. That's what Mr. Jarman said in evidence. He's now changing that.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that the fieldwork was completed over an extended period between two dates. I'm not saying it was completed continually between those two dates, which is what you're trying to suggest didn't happen. And I completely agree. There wasn't a continual period between June 24 and August 25, but that is the fieldwork period.
So part of that work had taken place prior to the previous sitting of the inquiry.
Yes.
And part afterwards.
Yes.
Was that going back to people who previously been included in the fieldwork, or was it an extension of the fieldwork?
We have got many ways and means of verifying and validating our fieldwork data. And as I said earlier, one of those was actually reviewing the sites that we visited for the PDA. So we did revisit and review the primary interviews in those sites. We also spoke at length with council officers like Mr. Bennett to confirm whether occupants on sites had changed. We also conferred in depth with those responsible for completing the caravan counts biannually as was, but annually as is now. So yeah, we have lots of checks and balances in place to put confidence to me that the baseline is accurate as of the baseline date.
But Stephen, sorry, Mr. Chairman, you told me on a number of occasions that sometimes you work on the basis of proxy interviews. You don't actually interview the individuals, but you interview people that know them. And it sounds in the context of what you've just told us that happened a lot here. You're saying that, well, we had ways and means, by which you're saying, well, we talked to council officers. But that's not an interview with the individuals.
No. I think you've got the wrong end of the stick there, Mr. Masters. Where we had completed interviews earlier in that fieldwork period, we sought to clarify with council officers that the residents on said sites were the same residents. So it wasn't updating by proxy an interview that wasn't completed with the residents. It was confirming that those residents are the same people that we interviewed at the time.
But Mr. Jarman, how many of your actual interviews were actually directly with the persons concerned, or were they and how many were by proxy with somebody else that knew them?
With Waverley, because we've got a very good relationship with the travellers, I've got a feeling that I can't actually put a specific figure, but the vast majority were completed in person with the residents, with a handful of non-resident households on some of the larger sites having their details filled in by friends and family.
Just so the inspector understands what we mean by proxy, which is where you go onto a site, people aren't there, and you talk to a neighbour.
Yeah, so somebody else has asked
No,
Mr.
yeah.
Masters. I think I understand the position.
Thank you,
But
sir.
Yeah.
what I want to be clear about, Mr. Chairman, is whether all the information that you'd got prior to the last session of the inquiry, when you gave evidence, in respect of all those people who were interviewed and those pictures, were they all included in the review?
Yes, they were either included in person through the work that was undertaken to complete the PDA,
Yes.
or they were updated in conjunction with officers from the council who work closely with members of the travelling community.
So although it may have been done in different ways,
Yes.
you went back to examine all of that information post the session last year.
Yes, sir, I did. Or my team did.
Right.
But so I do say, and it's something that is in our needs assessment, that there are considerable inaccuracies in the needs study. We pointed to various sites. And we say the explanation for that is that the council are not actually interviewing the individuals concerned, but that they're doing an awful lot by proxy and individual.
This is the proxy point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
And they're not really getting the real information.
I will have to disagree with that. As I said, there are some large sites in Waverley where we were able to interview the majority of households, but obviously a small number of households were not present during our multiple fieldwork visits. So we do take the opportunity then to collect as limited amount of possible household data by proxy, because in my view, by proxy data from another family member or a neighbour is better than having no data.
So what's interesting is if you actually examine the GTA and it talks about interviews, it doesn't actually make any admissions that not all the interviews are face to face with the individuals concerned, and they guess interviews with somebody else.
I think the word guess, Mr. Masters, is rather harsh. We collect information by proxy. We don't have a look and guess. If you interview somebody on a pitch and say, that pitch next door, there's no one there. Well, that's my brother. He lives there with his wife. They're in their 20s. They've got 2 kids. One's in primary school, one's in junior school. He's away working at the moment.
And Mr. John, when you collect information that way, throughout the GTA, you separate the travellers into 2 groups. You've got the ones who meet the PPTS definition and the undetermined households. If you've collected it by proxy, which category does that information fall into?
Because of the changes to the planning definition, which now includes all travellers,
Yes.
it makes it much easier to assume that they meet the planning definition, as in they are gypsies and travellers. And also, if you look in my GTAA in paragraph 6.4,
Yes.
it makes it very clear. Figure sets out the number of pictures, plots, and the number of interviews, proxy interviews that were completed or where an outcome was achieved. In my view, getting an outcome from each pitch is the critical point here in terms of ensuring the validity of one of my assessments. How I get that outcome differs in certain circumstances, but it's getting that outcome that is important.
Yes. And the answer to my question in terms of which category proxy interviews fall into, undetermined or PPTS?
They fall into definition need. The only undetermined households are those households where we have been unable to get information through any means at all.
So where you can't make either direct or indirect contact?
Yes, exactly.
I think Mr. Cottle wants to come in.
Well, my original question, the impression I got from the last inquiry was that the interviews began after they were originally commissioned, earlier than June 2024. And I was following that up by saying, well, did you do fresh interviews? And I haven't got a satisfactory answer, but what you've been told is they went back over the information. If you've got 162 unauthorised encampments, and we know that only a smattering of those are roadside encampments, how can you be sure without actually starting afresh. And I don't understand this business about the percentage that Mr. Masters was asking about that were conducted by proxy and those were done directly, because I don't think we've got an answer.
So what we've got is an admission that a large percentage, we haven't got an answer as to what, were done by proxy, because what Mr. Jarman just told you is that he was satisfied that the majority were face-to-face, which means to say a large element wasn't.
Can I ask Mr. Masters? I can't see anywhere in my GTAA that suggests anywhere near a large amount of proxy interviews were completed. That information cannot be extrapolated from the GTAA report. It's an assimilation that you have made personally, as opposed to taking it from the evidence presented.
That's my criticism, Mr. Jarman. Nowhere from reading your GTA will we get the impression that anything but face-to-face interviews have occurred, and that you've actually interviewed the individuals. I know that that's not the case because of cross-examining you in the past, but nothing comes out of the GTA to suggest actually a lot of the information doesn't come directly from those individuals concerned. And that's always worried me, and I've asked you about it on a number of occasions. And we've dealt with that in our submissions, and we pointed to lots of inaccuracies in the information you have, which we know because we represent some of the individuals concerned, who tell us that they weren't interviewed. So we wonder how you got information when they weren't interviewed.
I'm simply reverting to the points in the GTAA. I have not tried to hide the fact that we complete some proxy interviews. I've been very honest and upfront in the assessment that the outcomes are a combination of interviews and proxy interviews. Not hiding anything. But as I said, Inspector and Mr. Masters, in my view, having completed 180 such assessments, getting an outcome from a household is better than having no outcome and having to make assumptions about an undetermined household.
I've heard views on that. There was one other point of detail that I said I wanted to check, and that's you make reference to the plan period, Mr. Jarman. For example, in figure 13, which going all the way up to 2044. Now, is that something that you've just taken? Is that a period for an emerging local plan at Waverley?
Yes, but obviously there is a 15-year requirement in the PPTS for a minimum period for a GTAA. Yes. And then the period after that, which is very clear in the introductory paragraphs 1.1 onwards, are that it then was extended beyond 15 years to meet the dates or the interim dates for the emerging local plan.
So I wonder if I could just pose one other point.
Go on, Mr. Masters.
So I'm not certain, and Mr. Yarman perhaps could help by answering this, that since the information gathering exercise started in 2024 and finished in 2025, and although the baseline is said to be 2025, whether or not if somebody arrived in August of 2025, they would have been added to the numbers and interviewed. Because I get the impression that once they have a list, they work on the basis of that list and don't add anybody in, but I may be wrong.
Yes, you are. And this was what I was trying to explain to the inspector and to yourselves earlier, in that we have several checks and balances in place. And the final check and balance in this case was the July 2025 caravan count, which was completed by the council and provided us with a final check against the baseline to make sure that nothing had been picked up in July that we would need to be aware of before taking forward the analysis.
There's still the point that Mr. Masters raised. If something happened late in the day beyond the date of the caravan count, how would you be aware of that?
Well, if it happened later than July, then as in August.
In August, yes. I think that was
we rely on the council as providing us with updated planning decisions, etc., and appeal decisions.
That's
this is-
a problem, sir, because we, not just in this case, but in other cases, we say that there have been unauthorised developments that have been clearly missed and not picked up. I think we've given an example of some additional caravans on two pitches for that to be the case. So we're not confident that the diligence travels over, that the council communicate a recent unauthorised development.
I suppose the response to that, Mr. Masters, is that I can only work with the information I'm provided. And we've had this conversation on many occasions, and I am confident that based on the information in front of me, I have an accurate assessment as of September 2025.
And so I'm not certain that it, I think one could say that it might be accurate as far as the caravan count in July goes. But the difficulty with the caravan count in July is they only go to the known places, and if it's and that might miss some things. But anyway, let's just say that it's July rather than September.
Well, it's not accurate, is it? And we'll come to that, but
Well, we'll come to detailed points of accuracy
yes,
later on, but in terms of how the exercise
Mm.
has been done, do the appellants have any evidence to counter what Mr. Jarman has told me in terms of the interviews?
Well,
Or is it just, I understand the concerns you've raised and the points you've made, but in terms of evidence as to how the exercise was done?
So we all we can point to, I think that's what Mr. Woods is trying to do, is evidence we have from specific sites that indicate the inaccuracy, and which is what Mr. Woods was about to tell you.
Yes, and I think that Mr. Jarman has dealt with specific points concerning inaccuracy as well, which no doubt we'll come to.
I wasn't actually going to deal with that point yet because we haven't come to that point. What I was going to deal with is a more fundamental issue, and it's in my rebuttal evidence, and it's the fact that, as evidenced by ORS Appendix C, that's the household interview questionnaire.
Yes.
It largely remains the same as what happened in 2018.
Yeah.
And the point is, the interviewers do not recite the definition to those people who are asking a question of it. Obviously, they're not going to hand it to them to read it because some of those might have difficulty in reading and writing.
Understand. Yeah.
And the criticism came over, and I attached an appeal decision by Inspector Diane Lewis.
Yes.
Where she said this very point. It was the appellant in that point. You know, when you interviewed them for Gypsy and Traveller status, did you read this out? And the answer was no. So we don't know what hurdle they're trying to overcome in the first place. So that's in my submission a defect of the assessment.
Yes.
Carried out. So that's an overview point.
Can I come in on that one quickly, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
A couple of years ago, that may have been broadly relevant, but it's been accepted now. All travellers meet the planning definition, so it's a moot point in terms of this assessment, which was made based on the 2024 planning definition, where all travellers meet it.
What do you mean by all travellers? Do you mean new age travellers? Are you just referring to gypsies and travellers? Because I think you're just referring to cultural travellers, aren't you? And the point that's being made is the definition's wider than that.
I include all travellers. I include new travellers, gypsies, Roma, show people, even though they're not technically travellers, Welsh travellers, Scottish travellers. It's in the GTAA.
But that's the very point that we make. You're asking the wrong question. Read the definition. It relates to people who have a tradition for travelling in caravans. That may be greater than your perception of the term traveller. And to create and say I include all travellers, you're asking the wrong question. You're making a presumption rather than just using the definition to get to what you should be.
Yeah, and I've made this point in my May rebuttal that Mr. Lintott has kindly pointed me towards. In 2.4 to 2.9 in your statement, Mr. Woods, you do contend the planning definition doesn't apply exclusively to travellers, but also to those who lead a nomadic way of life. And the GTA is wrong to exclude non-travellers in the analysis of need. I do agree in principle with those views, but I'm firmly of the opinion that all of the non-travellers identified in Waverley do not lead a nomadic way of life. They are professionals, they are doctors, they are nurses, they are teachers. They are simply renting caravans as an alternative
Right.
to rental housing and.
Can we park that? Come
Mhm.
back to that point because I've got some specific questions on that. I'd just like to go.
Can I just come in before?
Sorry, Mr. Cottle. Yes,
Just if you look at page 64 of the GTA.
GTA. Sorry, 64.
That's right. There's questions 10. What are the main reasons for your household not travelling anymore?
Oh, you're in the appendices.
That's right.
Yes.
And in fact, the point for Mr. Jarman is that a number of those questions, 2A, how long have you lived? And is this your permanent base? And have you ever travelled away from the permanent base? Are redundant after the change in interview. And
No.
so therefore, the question is, you don't need to have travelled. Do you have a cultural tradition of living in a caravan? And that question isn't asked. And we're in an inquiry which is inviting you to say there's a robust evidence base. And we're questioning the very premise to distinguishing who's to be counted.
The sheer fact is a nurse living in a caravan for a number of years is covered by the definition.
How?
Because she has a history of living in caravans. It doesn't matter her ethnicity. It doesn't matter her culture. The definition is very wide.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. And there's been no change from the 2018 questionnaire to the latest questionnaire. Hasn't taken into account that change in the definition.
Okay. Well, I want to leave that point there because I think we're going to come back to that. And I just wanted to.
I really do apologise for interviewing, but the other point that you raised is about the plan period.
Yes.
And it's a very interesting question because it links into what is the 5-year period. And obviously, if you've got a fresh GTA, why on earth don't you take your 5-year period from it's either 2029, if the interviews began early 2024, which I understand, through till 2030, or you can take the plan period, which is 2023 to 2028. But you could actually get a difference in result depending on which plan period or 5-year period you take.
Inspector, I mean, we
Yeah.
can debate these sorts of issues. I mean, paragraphs 9 and 10 of the PPTS say that you assess the 5-year supply by reference to a GTAA, which deals with what 5-year period is. We can make submissions on that. You've asked what the base date is and what Mr. Jarman has actually done. If we're not careful, we're not going to get past point 1 of your agenda. So I think you've gathered all that information. If Melinda Friend wants to make submissions on when the plan period could or couldn't have started for the 5-year supply, well, that's a matter for him, I think.
But it's quite clearly set down in the GTA what's been taken, and I just wanted to check what that tied in with. I want to go back to what's been looked at in terms of the components of need, Mr. Jarman, and check whether aspects that are usually mentioned, such as doubling up unauthorised encampments, temporary planning permissions, etc., are all taken account of in your assessments.
Yes, the report makes it very clear the components of need that were identified and how these contribute towards need, both in the current 5-year period and the future period to 2024, 2044, 45.
Right. Well, I had a specific question concerning travellers who may be living in bricks and mortar accommodation. In the GTA, in paragraph 320, you say we do not model or extrapolate need from households living in bricks and mortar, and instead rely on local evidence of need that is identified. Now, that seems to suggest that you may take it into account, but I don't think there's any figure in the tables for any need from that source. And I'm a little bit unclear as to what the position is regarding families who may be living in bricks and mortar. Can you help me on that?
I think the GTA makes it very clear that it is an evidence-based document.
Yes.
And that we have gone to great lengths working with the community and with other stakeholders to seek to identify households living in bricks and mortar. We ask everyone we do interview if they have any relatives or friends who may be living in bricks and mortar with a need. We speak with stakeholders, we look at housing lists, housing registers. We speak with traveller education officers who very often engage with families living in bricks and mortar. And we do seek to identify and interview anybody who comes forward through this approach. The reason we don't extrapolate this is because we've done a lot of work over the years. And while some people may claim that there's a massive need from households in bricks and mortar,
Yes.
our conclusions differ from that, in that there are some agents not represented around the table today who take the census, they times it by 4, and they take 10 to 15% of the census and say that is now a need, but providing no evidence to that. I don't do this. I base this on evidence. And also, as set out in the GTAA in paragraph 3.3, I make repeated references to the outcomes of a local plan inspection report in Malden, where essentially the inspector in this case comes down on the fact that you can't just make up figures without evidence. You can't account for a need that's not been established to exist. But I make it very clear in the recommendations that the council should therefore have robust development management approaches in place to deal with this need should it arise at some point in time.
But what do you mean by your general point in 320 when you say we do not model or extrapolate need? You said you seek to identify whether there is any need in bricks and mortar.
Mm-hmm.
So presumably, do I take it from that that if you had indications that there was need, you would seek to interview those households?
Yeah, if we identify households in bricks and mortar that are willing to complete an interview and we identified need from those households, that need is included.
That would be included?
Yeah, providing it could be demonstrated that it is a need and not a want or a desire.
Right. So what do you mean by the opening sentence of 320? We don't model or extrapolate. That's reads as a general point, as though bricks and mortar aren't taken into account at all.
No, I don't extrapolate. I don't model the potential outcomes of bricks and mortar need from the 0 or relatively small number of interviews we are able to complete. So let's say we interview 5 households in bricks and mortar and they demonstrate a need for a pitch. And we know that there are 500 households in bricks and mortar, again, plucking figures out of thin air.
Yes.
The extrapolation would then say, right, well, if you've got 5 from this population and you've got an overall population of 500, you would extrapolate or model that up and say, actually, if you've got 5 that you've interviewed based on your overall population, if we weight this statistically, it could indicate a need for up to 50. But based on the Malden decision, we can't take account of that. We can't do that work because we can't report a need that's not been established to exist.
Right, so you simply take into account what's been identified?
Yes, we do, sir.
Mr. Cottle, I think, wanted to...
Just interested in the housing register point, because I think the WS planning information is to the extent that if you're actually got a site, you're not automatically taken onto the housing register. And in this case, all of the appellants were advised by solicitors to go down to the housing department, and the housing department were very happy that they stay at Stovolds Hill rather than become a cost to the community because they didn't have any housing for them. But you would have thought that the housing register would have had some sort of details of people applying to go on a waiting list. And it seems to us that people aren't actually put on the waiting list because they're disqualified. But that still doesn't mean that the housing authority doesn't have a record of those. who
Oh, this is a
approach
different point, isn't it, Mr. Cottle? A different category you're
Yeah.
looking
Well,
at.
it's sorry, well, let's switch it back. It's those in bricks and mortar that are not counted. We know that there are over 60 households in bricks and mortar. We know that no interviews were carried out with those in bricks and mortar. And we're suggesting that some people in bricks and mortar wanted to apply for a site. We know that our clients went to the council to apply for a site. There should be records within the council of those that have applied for a site.
I think
Yes,
as the
and
inspector said,
the point,
you're talking cross purposes here. We're not talking about waiting lists here. We're talking about the housing register to identify households living in bricks and mortar, whereby they have described their ethnicity as gypsy or traveller, which is a category that local authorities do collect. We're not talking about waiting lists. That is a discussion I think we will have, but this is simply seeking to establish any potential contacts in bricks and mortar who might be gypsies and travellers. And there's nothing on the waiting list criteria that disqualifies a gypsy or traveller living in a house in Waverley,
Mr.
to the
Woods.
best of my knowledge.
thank you, sir. Well, we are talking about people that live in bricks and mortars that meet the definition, and we've got the number. And what RRS do in their figure 8 is so there's a zero need for those persons living in bricks and mortar to meet the definition. That really cannot be right. So what they say is they haven't been able to reach them. And our point about waiting lists is that for the Surrey County Council site in the borough,
Yes.
there's a criteria, and you don't get on the waiting list if you're living in bricks and mortar. And I attach the criteria to my rebuttal evidence to demonstrate that. So it seems to me that those gypsies and travellers and those meeting the definition that live in bricks and mortars have got no chance of being counted, either because they can't go onto the list for a public site, and possibly that's the reason why they're in bricks and mortar accommodation, because they can't afford to buy a site, so they'd need to rent it. Or they're just ignored anyway, and their need is put down as zero.
In your view,
Mr.
Mr. Woods, how should that have been assessed?
Pardon, sir?
In your view, how should that have been assessed, the need for bricks and mortar that you say exists?
Well, the council and RIS, so they're working close collaboration with the council, should know those persons, and so they should be able to be identified. And no doubt, as Mr. Cotterill says, people have gone to the council and said that we've got a need for a site. So, you know, it may not be all of those persons, but at least it will be some of them. And there's nothing whatsoever, and it seems incredible that
But the fact that people have gone to the council, such as the appellants in this case, that doesn't indicate they're in bricks and mortar.
not for the appellants, no, but it'd be other persons that live in bricks and mortar. I'm sure they would have made an attempt.
You're critical of the approach the council has taken. I'm just trying to understand what you think should be the correct approach to pick up these people.
Could I come in to that?
In a moment, Mr. Masters.
Well, they should be at least properly identifying at least some of the gypsy and traveller community that living in bricks and mortar. It can't be impossible. They've got zero need, apparently, and that can't be right.
So what we know, sorry, Stephen.
Can I just come in? The impression we get is that Surrey County Council have not had an applicant from bricks and mortar applying for a site.
So what we know, going back from the census, is that there are a number of gypsies, ethnic gypsies, living in the
Yes,
district in
well,
bricks and mortar. What we don't know, because the census figures aren't available to anybody else, who those are.
That's right.
But it would not be difficult to identify those by correspondence. It need be for the council corresponding with all those people that are in local authority accommodation and asking whether any are gypsies and travellers and wish to move.
Are you honestly suggesting, Mr. Masters, that the council write to thousands, if not tens of thousands of their tenants, asking them if they are gypsies?
No,
That is very disproportionate. And
would
as I set out in my 317, we go to this level of approach. We speak with the traveller liaison. They pass on our contact details. So back to your point,
Well, let me-
Mr. Woods,
let me make it-
no, can I finish, please?
One moment, Mr. Masters.
Yeah.
Back to your point, Mr. Woods, we identified no need. I'm not saying there isn't a need. We didn't identify a need, despite all the efforts we went to, and you couldn't suggest an alternative approach other than through Mr. Masters writing to every single household in Waverley, asking them if they're a gypsy.
They have records, and they could be asked to see whether their patients or parents of children would be prepared for them to disclose their ethnicity for the purposes of accommodation need assessment.
Have you not heard of the GDPR?
And there's
You can't do it. It's not lawful
I have
to
heard of the
ask
GDPR.
people to
No.
contact without consent. Hence
the
the fact,
school-
going back to the schools issue.
Well, I've
I've
asked
made
the
it-
Surrey County
one moment,
Council
Yeah,
as
I've
well.
made it clear on several occasions, we liaise in detail with the traveller education officers who work with from Surrey County Council, with the schools to support gypsies and travellers. They pass on our details to as many of their clients as they're able to. None of them got back in touch with us. We can't be given a list of addresses without consent. We can't be given a list of telephone numbers without the consent of the person who we would be seeking to contact. And through all of the work we did, nobody came back to us.
So where
Okay.
is it, the letters that you sent to these stakeholders?
There are
the-
calling cards.
So I'm going to go
So
back.
they're calling, they're
No.
cards. So you have someone that's dealing with gypsy and travellers for schooling, and you give them a business card. Is that it?
No, the traveller, you obviously haven't listened to me, Mr. Woods. The traveller liaison officers speak with their families. They explain what the GTAA is about. They explain the importance of getting in contact with us if need be. And if you would like to get in contact with Steve's company, here's their phone number on a card. No letters, no jargon. They have the conversation. They pass over a telephone number,
Right.
essentially.
I want to move on. I've heard views on that. I want, another area I want to check is turnover, and I think it's raised by Mr. Woods in your rebuttal, Mr. Woods, at paragraph 3.2. And I just want to be clear, first of all, about what you're saying there. It's on page 10. Now, are you saying that turnovers is included as a component of need and it shouldn't be? That's the question.
No, it's a component of supply.
Sorry, yes.
It's a component of supply.
You're saying that's how it's
counted
been
in
treated?
pitch turnover.
And you're saying it shouldn't be?
Indeed, sir.
And it's
Yeah.
not.
Well, that was going to be the point I was
Indeed.
going to.
It's not going to be available. So if someone's got a site with, say, 4 pitches,
Well, my reading of the GTA is what Mr. Jarman has said. I don't think ORS are taking it into account as supply.
There's a whole section, sir, as you quite rightly read in the GTAA from 3.4 over. Some assessments of need make use of pitch plot turnover. ORS do not agree with this approach or with making any assumptions about turnover. And then I provide several examples from decision notices, etc., that support my view.
yeah, I say it's unsound to conclude that because a pitch becomes vacant on a site that's owned by a particular family, that then becomes an element of the supply to the general gypsy and traveller community, because it won't be.
Because I don't do that. Because I've just explained to you, I do not use turnover. So it's not a component of supply in the assessment.
That is a interesting point. It's whether the a site that's occupied in breach of condition by non-travellers is the same thing as turnover within existing stock, because you could say it is or you could say it isn't.
Well, obviously, isn't it? It's never been occupied by gypsies and travellers because there is no turnover.
And it's going to become available. So it is a supply element.
No, and to sort of cut to the chase on this, there are other companies that do assessments, and pitch turnover is normally considered in relation to public sites. So if you've got a public site where pitches are available for people to apply
Yes.
to, but potentially not in Surrey due to issues that Mr. Woods has raised, and there are 2 pitches become available during the completion of the GTAA, and other organisations will say, right, the GTAA runs for 20 years, therefore if there's 2 pitches of supply in the first year, we'll assume 2 pitches a year for the next 19 years, and then artificially include a supply of 20 pitches. Now, I go on to make it very clear in the assessment, in 3.43, that natural turnover of pitches and plots on private sites should be continued to be monitored, as turnover does happen, but I just don't include it as a formal component of supply. So Mr. Smith's mum dies, her pitch becomes available. Therefore, that is supply, but I don't make an assumption that Mr. Smith's mum will die and include that to net off against the need that's been identified.
But
Mr. Woods.
what is happening is, that's the case. It's more relating to the PDA, which is a turnover of pitches being an element of the supply. That's where it ends up. And if it's criticised in GTAAs that you shouldn't be doing that, why should it suddenly come in as a PDA?
I disagree, because all of the potential need identified in the PDA is intensification or reconfiguration of existing sites. It doesn't take account of turnover whatsoever in the PDA.
Well, it does.
Where?
It does, because what it's relying upon to a certain extent, particularly at Lydia Park, is that there will be a turnover of pitches because allegedly some of the pitches are occupied by non-travellers.
That's in the GTAA, not the PDA.
Well, it's proposing intensification in the PDA. It's the sites that are listed.
Yes.
You're talking 2 different points here, Mr. Woods.
It's a linked point. It's a linked
not.
point. It is.
Okay, Mr. Woods, let me hear what Mr. Jarman has to say in reply to your suggestion.
All of the sites identified in Lydia Park that have planning permission that has been implemented, that are not occupied and have never been occupied by travellers, are included as supply in the GTAA, as a component of supply. Not turnover, I don't do turnover, and because they've never been occupied by travellers, they couldn't be turnover anyway. The PDA then seeks to identify the capacity of existing sites to meet identified in situ need. For example, from concealed or doubled up adults, from teenagers who are going to need pitches moving forward. So they're 2 very different purposes here. The PDA serves one purpose and the GTAA serves another purpose.
You're having a quantum leap to say that it's alleged, you're alleging now that some of the pitches were never occupied by travellers.
Right.
You can't possibly know
No,
that.
I'm coming back to that whole area. We keep heading in that direction, but I just want to go through Mr. Cottle.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
And I genuinely don't know the answer to this, but if I look at table figure 6, which is under paragraph 6.4 on page 34.
You're in the GTA.
That's right. And if I put a circle or a star against every row that has notes about 14 times non-traveller, and if I add up all those that sort of 14 times non-traveller, 29 times non-traveller, and if I add up all those times non-traveller, I get to 110. And if I moved on to figure 7 on page 38, under paragraph 716, could I have a third column? You've got meeting planning definition, undetermined. Could I have a third column of deemed non-traveller, 110? And could we take from that 110 the fact that my client has said that he's not aware of non-gypsies or travellers? And is there an element of doubt that the 110 non-travellers might actually be travellers?
I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever that there are people renting pitches on Lydia Park who aren't travellers. And
I
I
didn't
think
say that, just an element.
Hmm?
I didn't say that. Isn't there a concern that you're not completely right about that?
No, because I'll take you to 2 points, specific rows actually in table 6. And I think what you've got to be careful of here as well is that the numbers of non-travellers don't relate to the numbers of permitted or implemented pitches. So you might have, for example, 4 pitches on land north of 11A Lydia Park, plot 16, but it's actually occupied by 14 non-travellers renting pitches. But there are a number of sites here whereby we have identified areas of Lydia Park where there are travellers living legitimately. Let me take you to the bottom but one row, land to the north of Lydia Park, brackets 4, the homestead. There are 7 pitches with permission at the homestead. There were 3 travellers living on 3 of the pitches. There were also 20 renters living on the other 4 pitches. So we're not making assumptions here. This is all based on primary interviews, and it's shown there, Yellowstone Park, 9 pitches, 2 occupied and interviewed with travellers, 29 non-travellers living across the remaining 7 pitches.
I'm sorry, you equate people renting caravans as not being travellers. What you haven't done, and I've already pointed this out to you.
Mr. Masters, I have said I want to come back to that. I'm not
No.
having that particular discussion just now.
But sorry, the point that, okay, I understand that. So, but if Mr. Jarman is going to keep asserting that somebody is a non-traveller merely because they're
Yes, and
renting.
I'm going to ask about that in due course.
But to get back
Mr.
to your point,
Jarman.
Mr. Cottle, I mean, I exclude what I believe to be non-travellers from the assessment. You've obviously totted up the number. I don't think it's appropriate to include them in figure 7.
Okay.
Mm.
You're going back to the questionnaire, I think,
Yeah.
aren't you?
And-
Mr. Woods,
Yeah, the point, if we just take the top,
are you
land
on
north
the
of,
same figure?
yes, figure 6,
Figure 6, page 34.
correct, yeah.
Go on.
Land north of 11A Lydia Park, and it says,
So
number
run
of
north
pitch-
of 11A.
Plot 16.
sorry, well, it doesn't matter actually, whether we would
Oh, you've
take
got it, yeah.
11A or 12A, I was going to refer to 11A.
That's fine, go on.
And it says 4 pitches,
Yes.
and then the third column is 14 non-travellers. But you see the second column is interviews, outcomes. There were no interviews. So how can they possibly know whether those occupants jump to the conclusion that they're non-travellers?
Mr. Woods, it's the same point as I told Mr. Astus to wait for, so we will come back to that. Mr. Chairman, two other things I want to ask about. In migration,
Mm-hmm.
I think that you link that to roadside encampments, I think. Is that the extent to which it's taken account of?
In migration follows a very similar pattern in terms of our methodological approach to how we deal with bricks and mortar households, i.e. it's evidence-based. Travellers do move,
Yes.
and the GTAA completely accepts that point. We do very often find displacement in migration, where households have outgrown their family site and have been, in some cases, forced into the roadside. I explain that in my paragraph 7.24.
I think you refer to 7 in this case, don't you?
So there are instances where we do identify in migration, and it tends to be displaced in migration. As I said, families where children have reached sort of young adulthood, have gone off travelling and need to come back. And possibly there are households that have been forced to move to other local authorities due to a lack of room. So yeah, these are accounted for as evidence of in-migration. Now, likewise with bricks and mortar, I also make it very clear that there may well be more. Travellers move, and you need a strong development management framework in place to address this need should it be found to exist. Going back to the Malden local plan inspector's point, we know that there may be need from in-migration, but it hasn't been demonstrated to exist. Therefore, you need a policy approach that can deal with it should it materialise, should it be found to exist.
And how would you expect to find evidence of that?
I
In terms of the roadside encampments that you've picked up,
Mhm.
is that information from the council, from interviews on sites, from people who are related to people on the roadside? How do you know about the 7?
These are predominantly people who are friends and family of households who we have interviewed, who have said,
So what was referred to earlier this morning, proxy interviews? Or proxy
but
information?
potentially proxy interviews,
Yes.
yeah, but because we just included them as a component of need, my 2 sons and their girlfriends are away travelling. There's
Yes.
no room here. They're going to need to come back when she gets pregnant, and they're going to need a pitch on this site. So
Yes.
it's that type of conversation that we will
Yes.
have.
So you take account of the 7,
Mhm.
and they appear in your tables, but you don't have a figure for any other form of immigration.
Again, I base my assumptions on being driven by locally identifiable need and not speculative modelling assumptions. That's made clear in 7.26 in the GTAA. But likewise with bricks and mortar, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I don't speculate. I base my outcomes on evidence, but then recommend the council have appropriate safety nets in place to deal with that, as I set out clearly in the following paragraph 7.27.
Okay. Are there any further points on in-migration?
Well,
Mr. Cottle?
it is a relevant point because it links into unauthorised developments. And at the last time that Mr. Jarman attended, he was very emphatic about the repeal of the duty in section 225 of the 2004 Act. And I was pointing out that section 124 of the Housing Planning Act 2016 amended section 8 of the 1985 Act, which now includes a duty to assess those residing and resorting. And it's that element of resorting that's represented by unauthorized roadside encampments, where there's an element of inward migration because, you know, unauthorized encampment knows no boundaries. People are pushed out, they're moving around all the time. And it's that concern is that you don't get an element of, well, of course I'd like a site in Waverley. If I'm looking for a site anywhere, if I could get one, from those people who've been roadside for a long time, but I prefer to have one near my family, in particular X. And it's that absence of interview in relation to those resorting where the inward migration would be picked up. Yeah, we'd like to stay here. We're hovering around here because we've got family here. And it's just that absence of any figure on inward migration based on unauthorised encampments that's a concern.
I think Mr. Jarman does include a figure for inward migration based on unauthorised encampments.
And
My question was about additional inward migration, which has a figure of 0.
I think the point you were making there, Mr. Cottle, is that there may be family members living on the roadside wanting to be living with family living on permanent sites. Now, having spoken to those families, they are going to know if they've got 2 kids and their partners living on the roadside wanting to move back to mum and dad's site. So we do pick up on those. We're also aware that the
The question
One
there.
moment, Mr. Masters, let Mr. Jarman finish.
I'm also aware that the council have a duty to carry out welfare checks with roadside encampments, short-term unauthorised encampments, as some people would reference them. And I understand that some of the questions asked are, why are you here? How long are you stopping? Do you have a permanent need within this area? So there are some families that will satellite around a particular area from encampment to encampment to encampment. I give the example of Luton, where they had 80 encampments recorded a few years back, but 78 of them were the same family, because the only public site in Luton is full of Roma travellers, and these were Irish, and they couldn't move to the public site. So, yeah, we do everything we can.
So there's no direct question, as I can see it in the questionnaire, that picks up on this. I mean, if
Picks up on
picks up on inward migration and specifically, do you know anybody, a member of your family that might be in bricks and mortar, might be on the roadside, but needs accommodation in Waverley? It's not asked.
Okay.
I think one one of the points that's coming across here is
No denial, it's not asked.
no. One of the points that's coming across here is there seems to be an assumption that my interviewers sit here with a clipboard with 100 of these questionnaires printed out and go through question 1, 2, 3, 4 and tick all the boxes. You and I both know, Mr. Masters, it doesn't work like that. You have a conversation based broadly around this questionnaire structure. And my interviewers have been doing this since before I started doing it. They understand, and very often that information is forthcoming. Is there any need arising from your family? Well, yeah, we've got my 2 sons on site, but we've also got Johnny and his wife, and she's pregnant on the roadside. She wants to come back. So it's a conversation as opposed to going through like question 13B, question 13C. Doesn't work like that in practice.
It's a conversation, but the interviewers are still trained to stick to the questionnaire and put the information down from questionnaire, not loads of other things. And so I'm afraid it depends on the diligence, but there's no evidence that actually, well, there's no evidence whatsoever that inward migration comes out of anything you're doing so far, because we have 0. So there's a failure somewhere, and it might well be useful to have a specific question that has to be asked.
Okay, question 15. Do you have any children or other family members that are not currently living with you who will need their own accommodation? I think that question is quite bluntly asking what you're saying isn't in the questionnaire.
Sorry.
Yeah, but you said you don't ask the questions. You just do a general overview.
Yeah, that information will come out in the conversation, but should you go back to the questionnaire, which you're saying doesn't ask that question, question 15 specifically asks that question.
Do you have any family members that are on the side of the road who are living in bricks and mortar, or do you know of anybody that's gypsy and traveller living on the side of the road in gypsy and mortar that needs accommodation in Waverley? Why don't you just ask a more direct question?
Because those outcomes come out of the conversations we have.
Well, they're not, though. That's the point.
Right, question 18A. Do you have any friends, families, or know anyone from the travelling community currently living in bricks and mortar? I mean, you can't ask it more bluntly than that, which you're saying isn't included in the questionnaire.
You're not going to agree on this.
No.
I've got your views.
Thank you.
I want to ask a question, Mr. Jarman, about household formation.
Okay.
Which, there's a reference to this on page 37 in paragraph 713, and you're making a distinction, I think, between the travellers who meet the PPTS definition and the undetermined households for whom you adopt a lower household formation rate. So my question is simply this: why a lower household rate when I think you're including both groups in terms of providing for in terms of need? So why take a lower household formation rate for the undetermined group?
It all comes back to, again, the Malden point, but a little bit more indirectly. This is trying to establish need that hasn't been established to exist, if you get what I mean. It's modelling.
Because there's been no contact.
Because there's been no contact. So we have significantly improved the way that we deal with undetermined households in that we now do model need from concealed and doubled up households and teenagers based on the outcomes of the interviews that were completed. And we then use that to uplift the household base. But in the absence of any evidence about numbers of children living on those sites, we revert back to the more statistically robust national rate of 1.5%, as opposed to the evidence-based local adjustment of 1.9%, which was uplifted from the 1.5.
So the 2007 guidance used a 3% figure. And Mr. Jarman, in his technical note conclusions,
Yes.
paragraph 3.3, page 78, says that locally derived rates can vary up to 2.75. So why isn't there a locally derived rate here?
There is. Paragraph 7.13 clearly says that we have used local demographics to uplift our national rate of 1.5
It's 1.9.
to a modelled rate of 1.9 based on local evidence. What I'm saying in the technical note is that there are instances where we would have had local evidence to uplift that from 1.5 to 2.7 if there were significantly high numbers of children.
And
evidence
here
living
you
on
think it's
sites.
1.9 that the uplift should be to.
Hmm?
Here you think the uplift should be to 1.9.
Yeah, so based on the proportion of
Yes.
children, we've uplifted 1.5 to 1.9. If there had been more children in the
Yes.
interviews we completed, it could have gone up to as high as 2.7.
But that's a figure for that local area.
Yes,
Given that the undetermined households are also in that local area, why not use the same figure for all the households?
because I don't have evidence of children living on those pictures.
Right.
So I wouldn't want to overinflate. But likewise, I have recommended or recommend to clients that they also need a safety net in place to address any need that may come through from undetermined households, which may be less than I've modelled. It may be more than I've modelled. I try to come in down the middle as best I can.
Yeah.
And to provide the council with recommendations for development management policies, should that need be established to exist, going back to the Malden point.
The 1.9 only relates to those who were interviewed. So you've got non-determined people who are not interviewed, and you estimate a new family formation, but you don't actually use that figure when you're calculating a 1.9, because that's only based on the people that you know.
That was my
within the
question.
so therefore you're necessarily leaving people
That's
out.
exactly the question you just answered.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was the point that was put to Mr. Jarman.
The-
And
the-
he's given me an answer. It may not be, may not agree with it, Mr. Cottle, but I've got an answer.
Simple maths.
Deliberately leaving out the number of children from those families you haven't
Well,
interviewed.
what
No,
Mr. Jarman's not saying he's deliberately leaving the children out. He's saying he doesn't know if there are children. That's the answer. I'm not. That's what I understand he's saying in any event.
Yes, very much so, sir.
Okay.
And that's
Mr.
also
Mr.
assuming
Woods.
over 65 persons that in bricks and mortar don't have any children.
We don't know if we've got any need. They didn't come forward despite all the efforts we made.
Our Surrey County Council.
I don't want to go back into that discussion. I've got my notes on that. Thank you. Are there any different points that people haven't made yet on the overall approach to the GTAA? I don't want to. I don't mean to repeat previous arguments.
No, it's not to do with the previous points. It's in terms of figure 6.
Figure 6. Yeah. Remind me of the page.
Page
number, please.
34 and 35.
So page 34.
35. I'm actually looking at 35, but
Yeah. Okay.
but it's the same table.
Yes.
As I put in my rebuttal evidence, where the top one there refers to Legends Acres,
Yes.
Farnham, and it says 4 pitches, 4 interviews.
Yes.
Well, there were another 8 caravans on the site occupied, and we know that for a fact. So they were ignored, not interviewed, not seen, apparently. And then Old Mill Farm Thursley, I've got it down as the permission expired on that site. Perhaps I've missed something. There's another permission, so you can't count it in terms of that table. And then the last one in that column, Wisteria, Allfold. There's a planning permission for a self-build unit on that site, so it's lost in terms of that assessment.
Yes. I think, Mr. Woods, there's a section in Mr. Jarman's subsequent document on page 5 which deals with this. In terms of, but Mr. Jarman, can you? I don't know whether all the points that Mr. Woods is making are covered there.
I've covered
But
all
I
the
recognise
points
the names.
on page 5 onwards in my May rebuttal. I don't want to go through them on a side-by-side basis. You've got my views in front of you. Just go into Wisteria. Yes, it's now got permission for a house. The house hasn't been built. The house will be to meet the needs of the people we interviewed.
What I wasn't what I wasn't entirely clear about when I read that, Mr. Jarman, are you saying that's in addition to that the one remains rather than
No. At the moment, there is 1 pitch on Wisteria. And they now
Yes.
have permission for one house to replace the pitch to meet the needs of all the people living on that pitch at the moment. So it's like for like, and it will become the first bricks and mortar household I'll go and knock on the door of next time we do an assessment for Waverley, because we know it will be gypsies living in bricks and mortar. That's one in the bag. We've already got their details. Mhm.
The point here is that at Legends, acres, that if you take the ORS equivalent of pitch in the household, and you've got a number of pitches that Mr. Woods has identified who haven't been entered, that's 8 unauthorised pitches.
Again, I've provided my views to the inspector, and people want to get home before the temperature gets up too hot today. Legend Acres, there were caravans there when we visited, and they weren't occupied. They may be occupied now, but at the time they were not occupied. There were only four households living there. I've made it clear, and we can play ping pong for as long as you need to, but that's my view.
Well, I totally dispute that because we know they were living there.
No, they are living there, but they weren't.
They were living there. Well, they were living there at the time of the survey.
We'll have to agree to disagree. Otherwise, we'll be playing ping pong in front of the inspector for another half an hour.
Might have better evidence.
We visited the site. We visit the site on a regular basis, either myself or Mr. Brownjohn.
Yes.
Right.
There's an ongoing planning application that was submitted because Mr. Bennett says the number of pitches on there are unauthorised, and I set out what has got planning permission, what hasn't got planning permission. So we eventually submitted a planning application for it
Yeah,
for people that are living there.
Yeah, I'm not
That's a
disputing
matter
that.
of fact. They were living there. Don't interrupt, please. They were living there at the time when Mr. Bennett approached us, and when you did your assessment. Your assessment runs from June 2024 to September 2025. They
We recorded a number of unoccupied mobile homes, and the households that were interviewed stated they're currently in the process of applying for 8 additional pitches on the site.
Yeah.
That's what we were told, and that was corroborated by Mr. Bennett. And that application has now been submitted. So there's nothing factually wrong in my paragraph 16. That's what we found.
The retrospective application for the occupation of the caravans, 8 additional pitches. You know, where did, if you're saying Mr. Bennett sent you the information they're unoccupied, why was Mr. Bennett at the same time saying to us, can you please submit a planning application for their residential use or remove them from the site? Can't have it both ways.
I base my outcomes on evidence from the interviews that said that whilst there were a number of unoccupied mobile homes, those interviews said they will be occupied once the planning application has been processed and submitted. So that's the evidence I have based my assertions on.
Mr. Cottle.
The point really is whether the interviewer is opening their eyes and seeing different pictures.
Believe me, they do.
Okay. You've both addressed that site. I just want to be clear on the wisteria point. I think there are 2 sites like this where there's permission for a dwelling house. And I just want to,
With Twin Oaks, so I was going to update you on that. The application was actually refused on the 14th of May this year because of the loss of a gypsy and traveller pitch.
right.
So, because that was an application for a custom home. It
Yes.
was refused planning permission.
As with wisteria.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that doesn't change things then?
Doesn't change something. Well, apart from the council are proposing that there should be 2 pitches there, and we'll come on to that later on. But you got someone that's wants to have a housing on there. It's a matter of fact that it's been refused. There's no appeal at the moment shown on the council's website.
But what it doesn't do, sir, is render that site unauthorised because it was for a replacement of a dwelling unit on an existing permitted site with a different type of dwelling unit, which has been refused. So as you quite rightly point out, it doesn't change anything as per the GTAA. Likewise, wisteria, which was permitted. So interesting why that one was for exactly the same reasons. to meet the needs of people who wanted to change their living circumstances from a caravan to a house.
Sorry, where's that evidence?
Hmm?
You have the evidence that an application was submitted for a self-build, which was granted at the time of your surveys were carried out in September 2025. You're saying that that was going to be occupied by the people that were travellers on the site. All I said was, where's the evidence for that?
Because we interviewed them. And they said, we've got planning permission for a house, we're just waiting to get the funds together to build it, then we're all going to move into it. It's not in the GTAA because that's a little bit too much detail for me to be publishing.
But in the GTAA, it says that there was one interview and there was one pitch.
Yeah, because there was one pitch at the time, as I just
Yeah.
said, they haven't
And
got
your
the
both
money.
states
They
runs
haven't got the
We're in danger of
funding.
going round and round
Yeah.
on this.
It's not a house at the
denying
moment.
the obvious.
It's not a house at the moment, Mr. Woods. They haven't got the funding.
So
to
I
build
think
it.
we've established it doesn't actually make any
Yes.
difference to the figures, which, I mean, the reasons behind it may be, and there may be, as Mr. Woods has adverted to with PDA, there's looking for another pitch on there, so that's a different question.
Yes,
But it doesn't change the figures at this point.
okay. I do want to move on now to the actual calculation of need that's been undertaken in the GTAA. But before I do, Councillor Stern, you've been sitting there very patiently listening to the detailed points that have been made by the main parties. I just want to check whether, it's entirely up to you, but I just want to check whether on this first point about the approach to the GTAA, there's anything you wish to add to the discussion.
Not really. I mean, I've done research as part of when I was working full time, and I think the approach that Mr. Jarman said, and I know when you set out the list of 10 or 20 questions, how many it is, that when you start talking to people, other things come out that can be relevant or new additional information. So, as I said, I support it. My other comments are probably not appropriate for this at this point.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. What I want to do under the second heading is to get an idea of the parties' views as to the extent of need and to make sure that I'm understanding the various figures correctly in the GTA, because I think they're presented rather differently. I'm looking at pages 40 and 41, and then also at page 54 and 55, where it's a slightly different approach to the way that need is set out. But in terms of, if I can go to figure 8 first. In understanding figure 8, I think there's a calculation that needs to be made in terms of looking at current need, in that it assumes that that current supply is available and is taken into account, and that I think it's showing a net need figure. I just want to check that I'm reading that correctly, Mr. Jarman.
Yeah, it's a net need figure of 101, which is the 65 current, the 64 future, less the 28 supply.
Yes, because the total starts off at 129, I think.
I would say here that there's a sort of overarching question. I don't know if
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Lintott might have a comment on this, but where does the burden lie in all of this? Which party has the burden of proof? And you say, well, there's no burden of proof in planning inquiry. It's actually on the inspector just to reach a proper decision based on the relevant information. But I would ask you to take into account that if the planning policy for traveller sites expects planning authority to demonstrate something, my point about disclosure of the enforcement file or disclosure of the evidence on which it's decided that somebody is a non-traveller, it's not so much our responsibility to prove it, it's on the local planning authority to disclose this information. We haven't got the disclosure that can satisfy you that decision on non-travellers is robust when there's no direct question asked. Do you have a cultural appropriation, a cultural need for being accommodated in a caravan, irrespective of whether you've travelled or not?
This is in relation to the
The
28. Yes,
There isn't a robust evidence
because I
base.
think I'm right in
There isn't
saying
a robust evidence base.
that 28 all comes from Lydia Park, I think, doesn't it?
Yes.
Because I think that's clear from, it's not this document. I think it might be
No, I
your
think it's one of Mr.
response
Ward's
where you have another
tables.
table.
So Inspector, you're absolutely right. Table, the last page of 16B of Mr. Ward's evidence, at page 24, has a figure of 28 from Lydia Park, which pitches that are not 5 So that's where that figure is reflected.
Yes, I think I found it somewhere else as well.
Well, it will be a number. That's the figure.
Yeah. Mr. Cottle, I hear what you say about the burden of proof in relation to the 28. That apart, and I understand that the questions that are being asked about that. Do the appellants otherwise accept the magnitude of need that's set out on those pages 40 and 41 of the GTAA?
So only as a minimum. We say that it underestimates need. But it's a minimum starting figure for you. And so the burden of proof quite clearly rests here with the council, because it's for them to prove that there's a 5-year supply.
Yeah, that's the point that I think Mr. Cottle was making.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I know it's out of context, but and you didn't want me to come back to it, but the question that Mr.
Is it Lydia Park again?
Yeah, it's Lydia Park. The
Well,
question
I want to have a specific discussion about Lydia Park, probably after we've had a break, because I realise that that's...
It was a question relating to bricks and mortar, sir, and Mr. Jarman said, oh, there's a question where we clearly asked that. But if you actually look at the question, it's not, it's a confusing question. It's, do you have any family or friends or know anyone from a travelling community currently living in bricks and mortar who we should contact for this study? It doesn't say who are in need. And most GPs and travellers aren't going to understand what who should contact for this study means. I mean, it's not a direct question.
I understand that you're not happy.
Yeah, that's the point,
with the questionnaire.
Anybody with a wit would just say are in need and have need accommodation, not who we should contact. It's designed to get an answer no.
And so, Inspector, for what it's worth, and this is obviously something for
Yes.
submissions, but clearly paragraph 28 of the PPTS combined with paragraphs 9 and 10 require a 5-year supply of sites to be demonstrated. And the submission is that the way in which that's demonstrated commonly, as you very well know, is through the provision of a GTAA. I think Mr. Jarman has provided something like 170 of those, and you're going to have looked at a number of them. In terms of the 28 figure, well, that's part of the GTAA and that's part of the demonstration.
Yes.
Part of the GTA. The GTA is just the number counting, but it's part of the PDA, which tries to.
Well,
No, it's actually the
Sorry,
GTA.
I'll just. Well, it's because that document is attached to it, so it's become part of it. But it's not it's not formally an assessment of need. It's an attempt to demonstrate how that need can be met by supply.
can I just add the point on the bottom row of current need, households on waiting list?
So whereabouts are you, Mr.
Households on waiting list for public sites.
Page, please?
It's page 40, figure 8.
Yeah.
Mr. Wood's point is you can't be a household on a waiting list. You're disqualified from it. And the second point is that Mr. Jarman's in agreement. They haven't asked Surrey County Council.
So I missed that. They haven't.
Surrey County Council to interrogate the position of people applying on the waiting list.
Paragraph 7.28 is the outcome of our review of how pitches are allocated on the public site in Waverley, and concluded that there weren't any households on any form of a waiting list, and that should pitches become vacant, they're taken up by households predominantly living on the site, doubled up from existing families. That was what the site manager told us.
So, Mr. Jarman, is your understanding that in effect, although this isn't what 7 to 8 says, there is in effect no waiting list on?
No, the site manager, who obviously manages the site,
Yes.
said, that, yeah, I'm not aware of a waiting list, but should a pitch become vacant tomorrow, his son would probably be
Yes.
first in the list to jump onto it, so to speak.
Yeah. So that's how it's operated. But
That's how the site in
yeah.
Waverley is operated, yes. And it's fundamentally how vacant pitches on most public sites are allocated in reality, irrespective of allocation policies, in my opinion.
We're obviously aware Surrey County Council have their management problems in terms of eviction because of people from families doubling up on pitches at the site. But the point is that row that says households on waiting list, it's just impossible to be a household on waiting list.
Well, this is a really difficult question to answer, because for once in a public place, I tend to agree with you, Mr. Cottle, but I'm also working in other local authorities across Surrey where we are being told there are households on waiting lists for public sites.
Different allocation criteria, so it's simple.
Well, no, because these are all managed by
No,
Surrey
if
County
it's Surrey,
Council.
it's the same thing. We've been
Yeah.
through this in
I know, and this
the
is
joint
why-
district. So
I think Mr. Jarman has some sympathy for your point of view on this one, Mr. Woods.
I agree with you, but I am still finding people on waiting list elsewhere in Surrey that
But
would
Mr.
come
Jarman,
under this.
is this a point that's particular to the one public site in Waverley?
No, because there isn't a waiting list.
Exactly, that's the
Yeah.
point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Can I just go back then to my understanding of the pitch needs on 40 and 41? I understand the reservation about the 28 from the appellants. Putting that figure to one side, which reduces the current need. If you do that, do you accept the general level of need that's indicated? I think Mr. Master said a minimum. If you take the 28 off, then it clearly becomes a minimum.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean,
but in other respects, are you broadly content?
no, we're
with the level
not.
of-
No, we're not, sir.
Okay.
No.
So
For the reason I've already stated, one example, I don't know all of the sites in Waverley,
yes,
but if I pick out a couple of sites and there's been errors in terms of the calculations of need, it leads me to think, well, we're either very unfortunate that those errors, or they're very unfortunate that the errors are sites that I know about, or actually this is the general trend.
so in terms of both the 65, which is the gross current need, and the 64, which is future need,
We would count, for example, the Legend Acres unauthorised pitches.
you don't accept either of those figures.
Yeah, that's one example.
So that's why we say it's a minimum, but actually bearing in mind the undercounting, we've demonstrated on at least 3 sites that the figure is going to be higher.
And
I appreciate, sorry. Go on. I appreciate, so the GTA hasn't been tested by local plan inquiry and is unlikely to be tested by local plan inquiry because this authority will cease to exist next year, and who knows what will happen. So we don't have that situation. So the only way we can demonstrate to you is the way we've done it, by producing evidence to show that the situation is not accurate as set out in those documentation from our own personal knowledge. I don't mean mine. I meant the personal knowledge of Mr. Woods and his firm. Mr. Woods.
Yes. But you don't put forward an alternative figure, Mr. Woods, I don't think. You have reservations about some of the figures that are included here. and you had general reservations about the approach. So am I right in thinking that for those two reasons, that's why you challenged the figures?
Yes, on the basis of principle, the GTA is flawed and undercounts the level of need. For the reasons we've already said, that there's zero calculation for those living in bricks and mortar. They could have taken a percentage on a precautionary basis. Haven't done that, so that's zero. And then there's highlighting sites where they've got the figures wrong, and so therefore that ups the level of need. I'm not prepared to say a specific number.
Yes.
It must be greater than the number that they're showing there, sir.
I just wanted to check exactly what your position was. Yeah.
So we would invite you to find that the figures are an undercount based on the evidence we provided to you. We don't think that it'd be right for you to sort of, was it for us to come up with a figure?
No, you've made that clear. I just wanted to check that that was indeed the
Yeah.
appellant's position.
I would perhaps be out on a limb, but if you took the 50 over 5 years and you added on the 8 from Legend Acres, you get to 58. And if you add on the one from the Wisteria and you add on the one from the other one, you're up to nearly 60. Instead, for the 5-year period, they've taken it as 37 plus 13. But we're saying it's plus those at Legend Acres, plus those.
Let me just make sure I've got your references right, Mr. Cottle. It's
at least
you're adding the 8 from Legend Acres. Mr. Cottle, I want to.
Wisteria, it's in the paragraph that we were looking at just a bit earlier.
Yes.
At the WS planning.
Yes. There was one
Rebuttal.
from Wisteria that you added on, and was the one from somewhere else?
Or it's the one from the other one that's been granted permission for a
Twin
for
Oaks.
bricks
Twin
and
Oaks.
mortar place, isn't it, I think?
And there was the old mill farm is not one.
Well, no, it's what they're saying.
That's
Steve.
right. But
Sorry, Twin Oaks is not the one, because that's the one.
Twin Oaks is.
Twin Oaks is we're not saying that that's not available, because the application for the house on that site was refused planning permission. What we're saying is that Old Mill Farm,
Yeah.
it's included in the table, but there's no planning permission for it. That's an expired temporary planning permission, and then Wisteria of Allfold, that's been lost. So there's 1, 2 plus the 8 is 10.
Okay.
we don't accept the evidence based to CW16B, because on our instructions, there are Romany travellers living on Lydia Park who've been classified as non-travellers.
Okay.
So, Inspector, and just to if we're summarising this issue for you to determine what the parties' positions are,
Yes.
I think that's helpful. You've had our evidence on Wisteria, Old Mill Farm and Legend Acres, so I'm not going to reiterate that.
No.
So you know our position on that. You know our position on the approach, in particular bricks and mortar, and the precautionary basis that Mr. Woods outlined and what we say about that. So I'm not going to go into that. And then you specifically exempted the CW16B because we're going to come on and talk about that.
Yes.
So we're obviously going to move on to that.
We are indeed. And I want to talk about supply in general and then go on to Lydia Park in particular. But I'm going to take a short break now. Before I do, Councillor Stern, anything in terms of the calculation of need that you want to say? Okay. We'll take a 10-minute break now, please. Adjourn and come back at 11:25.
That's right.
Right, time to resume, please, the round table. And I'd just like to go on to some points about the level of supply before rounding off with Lydia Park in particular. But before I do that, I just want to come back to two of the sites which were mentioned by, which were queried in particular by the appellants. Just want to try and get this clear in my own mind, Mr. Jarman. One is Legend Acres. And the reference that's been made this morning to the, I think to 8 unauthorised caravans on that site. I just want to be clear what the council is saying in respect to that. Are you saying that you don't, you refer to a planning application being in for 8 additional pictures? But what I want to know is, are you disputing that there are 8 unauthorised pictures?
We're disputing that they were occupied. We're not disputing there were unauthorised caravans, which technically wouldn't be an issue if they were just being stored in anticipation of permission, but I'm making it clear that we are disputing that there are 8 unauthorised occupied
Right,
caravans.
I just wanted to understand the basis of.
Mhm.
I think that's the gist of it. That's,
Yeah, the gist of it is there were also a number of unoccupied mobiles, and households interviews said they're in the process of applying for the planning permission for those caravans.
well, for pictures, yeah. It was the fact that that paragraph 16 didn't refer to the caravans, but you're not disputing that. It's the occupation.
Yes, so
There's actually 5 who've got planning permission.
Is that 5 of the 8?
5 in total got planning permission.
Yeah, but that,
But
right,
nothing to do with the 8.
right. You
The
threw
8 is
me there,
separate.
Mr. Woods.
Yeah, sorry, sir. Just realise that the column they're saying four, they interviewed 4, and there's 4. And what Mr. Jarman says is 8, there were 8 caravans there. And he's saying they're unoccupied, but there's actually planning permission for 5.
He says that as well.
Did he?
Yeah, it's in his paragraph 16 of his statement from May.
So why does he only count 4 then?
because there's 4 pitches, but with one pitch has permission for 2 mobiles on it, as per the conditions. So therefore it's recorded as 4 pitches, but one of them essentially is a double pitch. And there were only 4 households living on them at the time.
The planning authority must have the retrospective planning application for that. And what Mr. Woods has said is that the officer is familiar with the site, saying there has to be a planning permission or else those extra pitches have to be removed.
What Mr. Jarman is saying, he says he's reviewed the planning history. In his view, there is permission for 5 mobiles on 4 pitches, which is, I think, what he said, reiterated just now. I'm a bit unclear now because of the exchange, whether the 5 and the 8 are completely separate. Are you saying, Mr. Woods, that the 8 encompasses the 5, or?
No.
But they are separate.
There's 5.
The
got
5
planning
on the
permission.
4.
Yeah, the 5 have got planning permission. They interviewed 4, only counted 4, and there are additional caravans.
But
they didn't know what numbers were because they didn't
No,
say
but
the
the
numbers, but it
8
was
are
8.
in addition to the 5 on these 4 pictures.
Correct.
Yep.
There are outstanding for lawful pitches, is that they were for one house.
Yeah, I don't want to go into different areas. I just want to get clear in my own mind. So we've got 5 on 4 pictures plus 8 caravans, 8 mobile homes. Okay, that was one point. And the other one, Mr. Jarman, was wisteria, which you deal with in paragraph 19 of the same statement. And the appellants are challenging that on the basis that there's permission for a house. Are you still saying supply?
At no point in the GTAA or the PDA have I referred to wisteria as contributing towards supply. And I've acknowledged that it has planning permission for a dwelling that has not yet been developed. So the
Yes.
GTAA is correct in that at the moment it is a pitch with a family on who will move into the house once they've built it. And as there was no need identified.
So you're referring to its current status?
Yes. And as no need was identified, it didn't even feature in the PDA.
Okay. No, thank you. Right. go on to supply more generally. And this is where I think the PDA comes in, which you've dealt with in, which is at the back of the GTAA, and you've dealt with in a supplementary statement. And the potential supply from the PDA, my understanding is that that's over and above that's a separate matter from the 28 that I referred to in the first part of the GTAA. Am I right with that, Mr. John?
Yes.
I've got a specific question on, make sure I get the right documents. On your supplementary statement, which accompanies the GTAA. In your second table, which starts on page 4.
Yep.
I'm not clear about the last column and whether the heading is correct. Which is
Yeah,
is it 28? Is it the wrong way round?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you asked that, a similar question last time.
Did I?
Yeah.
I've been trying to get my head around this and
Yeah, so
struggling.
what that should be is representing the number of pitches which are
It's the vacant and occupied by others.
So it's actually saying the opposite of what it should be.
That's what I thought, but I
Yeah.
thought I'd better check that.
Yeah, that's just a typo.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Chairman, the current local plan, part 2, has a number of allocations for traveller sites. Has any account been taken of that?
Only where they have been identified in relation to the site suitable to assess during the PDA. So my understanding here is that local plan part 2 made more general allocations on sites to be specified, as in strategic housing sites, etc. But the PDA serves a similar yet different purpose, as in it seeks to identify those sites with need on them
Yes.
and determine how much, if any, of that need can be met on that site. So to cut to the chase, no, the PDA doesn't take account of allocations because I don't think any of them have got planning permission yet. I'm looking at the council. Yes.
So none have planning permission.
Of few of them.
So yeah, it's actually DS 18 and 20 do have planning
So
permission.
DS,
18 and DS 20 are Mr. Wood's 2 that we discussed previously, and those 2 do have planning permission. Actually.
but does it nevertheless remain the case, Mr. Jarman, that those are not taken into account?
Which site is this?
DS 18.
I think DS 18 and 20 have been mentioned.
So I haven't got DS 18 and 20 referenced on my tables.
So it's Kiln Hall, Stovolds Hill.
No, none of those feature in the PDA.
Yes, sorry.
DS20 Old Stone Yard?
Just get to it, Mr.
Yeah, there's the two are,
The order decision.
Kiln Hall is DS18 and Old Stone Yard
This
is
is all-
DS20.
I think the numbers are quite small. Old Stone Yard is down for 1.
Yeah.
Um,
And Kiln Hall is 3.
Kilnside Place, you mean?
South of Kiln Hall.
yeah, just 3 pictures. So the next question, Mr. Chairman, is if there are sites allocated in an adopted local plan, why aren't they taken into account?
Because they are already included as allocations. So the PDA is seeking to identify newly identified need in the GTAA and look at what proportion of that can be met on the existing sites.
But if DS18 and 20 haven't been implemented and their allocations, should they not be taken into account in assessing the ability to meet need?
If they're relevant here, it would only seek to increase the available supply. Yes. And then likewise, I suppose this is an appropriate time to bring this in.
So Inspector, that is a good point, with respect to yourself. That certainly hadn't occurred to me because obviously this inquiry has been going on for a while. I just hadn't appreciated before cross-examining Mr. Woods that DS18 and DS20 had actually been granted permission and that they were DS sites in relation to that. So I think what the PDA, as it describes it within the PDA, is to look at the intensification of existing sites
Yes,
to provide
that's my
to meet their
understanding.
own need. But your overarching point, where one's looking at 5-year supply per se, and you're looking at what sites are available to meet the 5-year supply, well, either DS18 and DS20 would be sites with permission, in which case you'll be applying the footnote 4 test relating to whether or not there was, I forget the exact words, but looking to unless there's a deliverable, unless there's clear evidence that they won't be implemented within the 5-year period. So you'd be applying that test in relation to whether they constitute part of the supply. So that is something that Mr. Jarman hasn't considered within his existing body of evidence. So those 4 are additional in that sense.
But doesn't the,
Just 1 moment, Mr. Cottle. I'll give you a chance to come in. I just want to check the position on the other allocated traveller sites as well. I've heard that 2 DS18 and 20 have planning permission, so they've gone 1 stage further beyond the allocation. But there are a small number of other allocated sites as well. Is it the same position, Mr. Jarman, that they're not taken into account too, or?
Yeah, the PDA didn't have a purpose of assessing allocations. It was simply looking to
So nothing in the local plan part 2 is taken into account.
unless they are sites that were included in the GTAA, had an identified need and went through the red, amber, green sifting system to be assessed in the PDA.
And is that the case?
I'm just having a
I
look.
don't think
now.
I've spotted any, but you'll be familiar with the documentation.
So Inspector, just to be clear then, for our notes, the ones that aren't addressed as DS18 and 20 are DS15, which is the Burnt Hill one.
get that far? Sorry to,
It's okay,
Take
Mr.
you
Cottle,
back.
yeah.
but I've got page 171 of the part 2, 2023 adopted allocations south of Kiln Hall, DS18. And it's talking about a planning application has been submitted. And then I've got page 33 of the PDA, which is reference Kilnside Place, Badshot Lee, which saying that the permission for additional 3 pictures was granted. That's a year later, presumably 2019 to the 2018 information. And then the proposal is for the extra 3 is by it's saying the site is considered unsuitable to provide any additional pitches, if each pitch were to measure 500 square metres. However, if smaller pitches, so your question is identifying an provision above the allocated amount by subdividing what is recently being permitted in the allocation into 325 square metre pitches.
Yeah, I'm asking about the allocation.
The allocation and the
Yes,
permission was for
it is
3.
Bradshaw
Yes,
Lane.
that's right.
And then this PDA is suggesting you can get an extra
Yes.
3 there by making the pitches smaller.
But I'm not going
Yes.
on to the PDA yet. I'm just want to check the position on the allocation first.
So
of
yeah,
all.
so Inspector, in respect of that, so I wasn't correct in that. Neither was Mr. Jarman in that DS 18 is within the GTAA information because the Kilnside Lane on page 34, Badshot Lee, the 4 there, that is the same 4 that you see on page 171
Yes.
of the LPP2.
So it just threw me that it's now called Kilnside Place as
Yeah.
opposed
Right.
to Kiln Hall.
Just tell me where it is in the GTA again, sorry.
Is that the same as that one? there?
Yes,
Yeah. So you have done.
but that's accounted for
Yeah,
as well,
so-
yeah.
But that it does say about 2, 1. Pictures for that.
So Mr. Lintott, where should I be looking in the GTAA?
So on page 34 of the GTA.
Yes.
Figure 6, if you count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 entries from private sites.
Kilnside Place.
Badshot Lee, that's the one that Mr. Woods and I discussed during cross-examination. So that is the same site as DS 18. So it has been taken into account in the base information of the GTAA.
And at page 59, it says it's 4 pitches of the GTA. It isn't.
Yeah, I've got it. I've got it.
It says 4 on page 34 too. Well, that presumably, is that because it's 4-3 net? That the 4's taking account of the extra 3?
Yeah, at the time that this was calculated,
Yes,
there was a planning application
Yes.
for additional pitches,
yes.
which is not accounted for there. It was a retrospective planning application. It took the council 2 years to determine the application, only recently granted it planning permission in the last 3 months. So it doesn't count number of
Right.
occupied
Oh,
caravans at that point in time correctly.
Oh, it's on to Old Stone Yard. Yeah. Right. I'm looking at the planning history for the Old Stone Yard.
Let's wait.
Oh, sorry.
But wait till we do one at a time.
Which one are we dealing with
We're
here?
dealing with Kiln
DS
Hall.
18, I think.
Oh, Kiln Hall, sorry.
Yes. Yeah. Kiln Hall, which is Kilnside Place.
I had it as having permission for 1 gypsy pitch and then WA 2019-1022 use of land for provision of 3 additional pitches, making 4 in total.
Yeah,
Yes,
which ties in, I think, with your figure 6,
yes.
and also ties in, I think, with the local plan, going up from 1 to 4.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so that one is taken into account in terms of the base.
It is, yes.
Right, what about the others?
Which Burnt Hill? I've got lots. Is it 9 Burnt Hill? Is it adjacent Burnt Hill caravan site? I'm not sure.
It's the one for the location.
That is an unauthorized travelling showman shop. That allocation. No, that's all been split. That map's not right anymore.
Are we
Mr.
talking
Woods,
about
can you-
Stone Yard now?
Can you assist?
It's certainly not a travelling show person sign.
No,
we're
we're
talking about all of them. I
Burnt
think
Hill.
probably, Inspector, we probably need to, I haven't looked at the allocations and related them back to this table. So it probably that would be something which might be useful for us to do, because I'm not sure what our.
Well, I think perhaps at
position
the
is.
end of the day, it's a matter of fact, isn't
Yeah.
it, whether or not they're taken into account, and it can be
So-
agreed with the appellants from Mr Woods. I simply want to know whether any of the allocations in the local plan part 2
Yeah.
are taken into account at the baseline or not. That's the extent of it.
And our point is
Yeah.
that even when you get an allocation, it becomes
Yeah.
very difficult period of time.
Yeah, I understand that
and
the
then-
caveats. I just want a factual
Yeah, the
position, that's
factual,
all,
yeah.
Mr Woods.
I think the
So
factual
Stonewall
point,
Yard was
Inspector,
refused by the council. We had to go to appeal
Yeah, well-
on the allocated site.
Mr Masters, yes.
It was actually, a retrospective calculation, so actually, I don't know whether it should have been counted for to me. So I can't see how it manages to follow. Because it was there before. Is that right, this one?
Well, I've asked for that to be checked, Mr Masters.
We'll check that for the inspector and get back with the facts.
Right, thank you.
Because I thought that what we were saying in our presentation, that was another inaccuracy of the calculation of sites. There were a certain number of sites that were already occupied, or have actually identified as being occupied. Subsequently, there seemed to be in the figures right.
I think the next question, in terms of my understanding of what's has been assessed, I think this is in relation to the PDA and the need that might come about through intensification, is in your supplementary statement, Mr. John, one dated January. And you've got a table on page 3.
yes,
I think somewhere you refer to the need for that site in terms of the columns. How do you? I just wanted to be clear about what you meant by the need for a particular site rather than an overall need.
right. If you look at the chapter 9 in the GTAA,
Yes.
it broadly sets out the high level methodology for
Yes.
the PDA.
So
So whilst the GTAA simply reports figures by components of need, i.e. X numbers of unauthorised pitches,
Yes,
X numbers of
yeah.
concealed doubled up, the first stage of the PDA is to break that figure down for each individual site. And also to break it down by each individual site, both for the current need and for the year 6+ future need. So what you have here in the third column on my table on page 3
yes,
is the current 5-year need for those households that met the 2024 planning definition, who were considered to be green or amber following the high level appraisal
yes,
in the PDA. So obviously there are sites that where there was need, where the council and us have concluded there's just not a chance. It's already full to capacity. We know the site is not owned by the residents and they're just renting it, and it's in Greenbelt, Triple SI, what have you. So a number of sites were excluded from the detailed
Yeah.
assessments.
and then in the first one in that table, the only one where there's a difference in the figures is the one on the first row at the Willows. All the others, the need, you say the need is met in the second column. We take a different view with the Willows, and you.
Yeah, I mean, my staff visited all these sites and spoke to people, and there was the one site at the Willows where, whilst there was a need for 3 pitches identified, they turned around and said, we've only got room for 1. We'd love 3, but there's just not room for another 2.
And it's flood zone 2 and 3.
Well, that's separate matter.
Separate point. And
Yes,
anyway, they said they've only got room for 1, but they'd like 3, but
Yes.
admitted that it just wasn't possible.
so we go down to the end of that column where 49, that's,
49 people, say, based on the points of view of the owners of the land.
yes,
So taken into consideration Mr. Cottle's point, there may be issues that would prevent
Yes.
these coming forward, but these owners have said, the Willows, you need 3 pitches. I've only got room for 1. 9 Burnt Hill, you need 3. Yeah, we've got plenty of room for 3.
so otherwise the information you're getting back is that there's scope for 49 according to that.
Yes,
table.
49 site residents, site owners said that they would be able to deliver that number of pitches on their site if they had planning permission.
But the point is whether it's to people of their own extended family or to complete strangers.
No, this is the point. If you actually read the description of the PDA, this is need that is already on that site. So it is for children that are now young adults who are married with kids who are doubled up. It's for teenagers, 16, he's engaged, he's going to need a pitch caravan of his own. Some of them are unauthorized, etc. So this is all need identified on each one of these individual sites. There's a small proportion, as we
Right.
discussed earlier, sir, where they are seeking need for family members who've been displaced and have sought to return through migration. But technically, it is all extended family members. None of this is going to be as part of this exercise to meet the needs of strangers.
Right, that's helpful.
Yeah. Can I just come
Yes,
in on
Mr.
the
Woods, of
Willows?
course, yeah.
Just to remind everyone that the site area, excluding the access road, is 0.525 of a hectare.
Sorry, where are you, Mr. Woods?
This is the first one in the
The
column,
Willows.
talking about the Willows. Site area, excluding the access road, is 0.525 of a hectare. So the existing plots measure on average 525 square metres. So the plots can't be subdivided to meet the requirement of a local plan that says in terms of minimum space standards of 500 square metres. So whilst the people are on there and overcrowded,
Yes.
they've still got a need for pitches.
Sorry,
They
that's,
shouldn't be
I missed that
granted
because of
planning
the noise
permission.
outside.
Hmm?
I missed the last part of what you said.
So although the persons are identified as being on the site, and Mr. Jarman is saying, well, they're quite happy to provide those pictures on
Yes.
the site, it's not possible in terms of meeting the council's criteria of a minimum site area for a pitch of 500 square metres. So they're overcrowded and they've got a need for pitches elsewhere.
I completely agree with you, Mr. Woods. And if you'd read the PDA, it explains exactly my conclusions on that site, in that it is a public site and there is no opportunity. This is under the final appraisal section in the PDA, Appendix 2 to my supplementary statement. We've concluded that there's a need for a lot more potentially, but taking into account the council's own 500 square metre restrictions and the fact that the existing pitches can't be split, there is one area of land of at least 500 square metres that's currently being used as storage that is suitable for the one pitch that we've said can be delivered on that site. And that the other pitches can't for the reasons you quite helpfully set out.
But also going through flood zone 3.
We're discussing flood zone issues later, I understand.
Well, it's in my response, and it's my paragraph 3.20. So I show the extract of the flood risk map.
Right.
There,
So my
and it shows
conclusion.
it's going through flood zone 3. So whilst I know the council's point is, oh well, this is an allocation, and we don't need to worry about that. But the point is, this allocation has not been through any form of public consultation whatsoever, and so can't be considered in the same sort of way. As is, we've got Hascombe Parish Council objecting to more pitches at Lydia Park.
Yeah.
And then the council, on the other hand, are actually proposing more pitches at Lydia Park. So one would imagine if it went through public consultation, that those residents wouldn't be very happy with that allocation. But instead of that, the council are doing something without going through the proper due process.
Just, microphone, Mr Masters.
On Lydia Park, that are identified in the PTA are for existing
No,
people
the
who are
figure of
overcrowded.
28, that's not from the PDA, is it?
That's in the GTA.
That's
We've
the
had
G-
this
there are
discussion
two-
several
I
times
think there are
already
two
today.
types of supply, Mr Masters, which I asked Mr Jarman about a little while ago. There's the initial 28, and then the PDA is a separate exercise on top of that. That's my understanding.
Well, I'm just going to stick with the number you just referred to.
28,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is in the GTA, I think.
the
Okay.
GTA.
Yeah.
It is, yes.
Yeah. So are you saying that is to accommodate all those currently overcrowded on Lydia Park, or those who are going to emerge into households in the next 5 years?
That's to meet, my understanding is that's to meet an element of current need.
Yeah, I'm just wanting an answer if that's correct.
Again, we're talking cross purposes. The 28 are pitches with permission that has been implemented. So they meet the delivery tests and have been included as supply, general supply, to net off against the need. So they're not specifically allocated to meet an identified need, whereas the PDA performs a very different function in that it seeks to identify need on existing sites and whether that could be met. So the PD outcomes are.
Sorry, now you're
Site-specific.
confusing me. The 28 I thought were for people on existing sites that you considered could be expanded. Is that right?
So
Or am I
let
wrong?
me have a go. So
Yeah.
within the PDA and this GTA, they're in different parts of the same document, but the GTAA for the target figure takes into account the 28 and uses that figure to reduce the target figure from 129 down to 101 in that table we looked at earlier.
Yeah.
That's separate from the PDA. The target figure that meets the PDA, that's what we're looking at the moment. These are the sites which are the PDA are looking at sites where they're looking to put extra pitches on existing sites. So the 28 has got nothing to do with the intensification argument. That's separate. And the inspector says that he's going to come on and we're going to look at those 28.
I want to see what you're
as the
counting.
last issue.
At the moment, I'm not certain. Okay, because it seems to me that this just needs to be clarified. Okay, perhaps you could just answer this question. The 28. Okay, are they additional pitches that you say can be created to reduce the figure of need?
No,
The 28 are pictures. So the way to think about it, I suppose the easiest way to think about it is if you remember the last page of Mr. Wood's CW16B,
Yeah.
he's actually identified all the Lydia Park sites and he's done a calculation of what he says, and Mr. Jarman says, well, you may have a different view, are sites which have planning permission, but in respect of certain pitches, Mr. Jarman says he's spoken to those people and they've identified as not being gypsies and travellers. Whenever he's done that, they've then in that table deducted that number of pitches from those permissions. So that's how the 28 is.
So the
reached.
28 are people that are occupied sites, which you say aren't occupied by gypsies and travellers.
That's exactly it. And the evidence base for that is that the overlap with the GTA is Mr. Jarman has spoken to the people on those pitches as part of the exercise of the PDA, and they've confirmed to him that they are
so
not gypsies
they
and
clearly
travellers.
can't be sites proposed to be met by an existing need on there, because you're saying the existing need on there, which we dispute, is not for gypsies and travellers.
That's right, but they're not purporting to be. They're purporting to be just sites which have permission and are not being occupied by gypsies and travellers. For the PDA, they've then performed the exercise of looking at other sites and saying whether or not they can intensify the use on those sites. But that's a separate bit. So if
how
you
many on for Lydia Park? How many on the PDA are you proposing? How many sites are you proposing could yeah, could incorporate additional pitches. How many additional pitches are you proposing?
So, well, the best way to do that, I think, for the inspectors' purposes, is the fifth part of, or I think it's 4 on the current agenda, is looking at Lydia Park.
Yeah.
And then we will look at 16B and we can have a debate.
Yeah, but I want to
with respect each one.
understand what Mr., because I thought that the inspector was being misled about the 28, and I'm right about that, because the 28 don't go towards existing needs. So can you just tell me simply how many additional pitches the PDA is proposing on Lydia Park? 4. And that's going to go to meet an existing need that's already there, which is the overcrowding in existing households.
Nothing to do with the 28 in the GTAA.
Exactly. So the 28 issue there isn't anything to do. You're saying, you're accepting those 28 are occupied, aren't you?
No, my
that's the
understanding
whole
is,
point.
that, well, can I tell you what my understanding is? And
Yes.
correct me if I've got this wrong. My understanding is that the 28, the council is saying they are either occupied by persons other than travellers or they
Yes.
are vacant.
Yes.
Well,
That's-
how
that's
many
what
are
I
vacant
understand.
and how many are occupied?
Well, that,
Oh, excuse me,
Could I wind back to a point that Mr. Woods introduced about the size, and Mr. Jarman saying, well, I completely agree with you about that. And I just draw your attention to pitch content and pitch size in page 45 of the GTA conclusions and recommendations. And it's paragraph 814 on page 45. It says pitch size. It says, while there's no standard size for a gypsy and traveller pitch, there are some examples of guidance. And I would say to Mr. Jarman, that's a deficient appraisal, because of course here we've got policy DM 37 at page 164 of the adopted plan. And what's not recognised, and it's a common theme of about 9 or 10 sites in the PDA, is that to advance those as allocations is in conflict with the adopted policy, because it's requiring smaller pitches than DM 17 is saying should be supplied.
Okay.
So it knocks out
Yes.
9 or 10 of them.
Okay, well, we'll come on to the individual sites in a moment. Before we do, just to,
so, well, Inspector, perhaps it would be useful for the witness just to answer that specific point, so you've
Okay.
got what the answer is.
if you look at DM 37, design principles for gypsy and traveller sites, it does state new gypsy and traveller sites should measure, I think it should say pitches, should measure at least 500 square metres, unless extended family members are sharing facilities, in which case their needs will be assessed individually. I think that second point, the unless, and it goes back to a lot of the guidance that has been produced nationally for public sites that sets out pitch sizes, but then says, actually, if you've got a family living together who are happy to, we will take account of that on an individual basis.
yeah.
And these are the principles we've sought to apply more broadly across the PDA, because this is all need to meet extended family members. So it does comply with
Yes.
DM 37. Yeah.
And Inspector, for your note, if you look at the pro formas for each site, there's a particular section where they look at the size of it in relation to that policy. So, for example, if you were to choose, and I don't ask you to turn it up, but 9 Burnt Hill, which is the first one that I've opened up, which is about 6 or 7 pages into the pro formas, it
Yes.
says specifically, there's potentially space available on the land at the eastern part of the site to accommodate an additional 2 pitches measuring 320 square metres on the basis that communal facilities such as day rooms and amenity space are shared. So that particular issue, the DM37 issue, is addressed through the individual pro formas.
Yeah.
So that would come back to none of these sites being available to any of the appellants, because they're just for those on the.
Well, that's a different point.
It's a different, well, it's a different point. Sorry, Mr. Masters, it's, it was where I wanted to go to a moment ago. I just want to check the appellant's overall position in terms of supply, just as I asked you in terms of need. Do the appellants, except that there is any other supply that's put forward by the council bluff in relation to the 28 and the PDA, or do you dispute it all?
So we say it's just aspirational. There's no actual.
I know that. So
we
what's the answer to
don't.
my question?
We don't. No.
You'd say it's far too early for you to count it as robust when it hasn't gone through consultation.
So there are no planning permissions. They're not allocations, and we never will be. I mean, where do we go? They're currently not available.
This is the PDA you're talking about?
Yeah.
What about the 28? Do you take the same view on those?
Well, so in
And so-
relation, the 28 is slightly different because our position is that they should be counted towards the need. It's a misinterpretation of the definition.
Yes, I'm asking you about supply, what your position is.
Can I just come in there? Alan? Can I just come in?
Sorry.
The CW16B says it's the details provided by the GTA interviews that indicate that the homes are occupied by non-travellers. So CW16B is parasitic on the GTA. And we were just told earlier, Mr. Jarman relies on CW16B.
It's the other way around. So the GTAA interviews are the evidence for the two say the same thing, but the interviews took place as part of the GTAA, well, PDA process.
And again, it's on the basis whether it's more likely than not that some of the travellers who not asked the correct question, given the context of the appellants being very clear that they do know of Romany travellers and Irish travellers living on these pitches, that there is an element of that 28 that may be wrong because they
Yes.
wasn't asked the right question.
So to answer your
But bearing
to
that
answer
in
your
mind, what is the answer to my question?
to answer your question, sir, I need to interpret it. I think what I understand in relation to the 28 is that what's said is that they're lawful, they exist, but they're not being
Yeah.
occupied by gypsies and travellers,
Yes,
and therefore they count towards supply.
yes.
And what we're saying is no. First of all, they count towards need because they're existing lawful gypsies and travellers, and therefore they can't count towards supply because they're not available.
Okay, I'll come back to in a moment, Mr. Jarman. I just wanted to be clear on the appellant's position. Is that the case for
If I
all
was
appellants?
if I was persuaded that there was an available site that was vacant, that didn't have planning constraints, that wouldn't require subdivision, and that I knew that the owner was prepared to make it available to strangers, then I'd be prepared to count it. But all things being equal, there are a number of hoops.
Yes.
And it's certainly not compelling evidence, and it's certainly not established on the balance of probabilities when it's still got to go through the consultation process.
Are you talking about the PDA?
Yeah.
I'm talking about the 28
Okay.
at the moment. So
the
my understanding from Mr. Masters is that the 28 are disputed.
Oh, yes, the reality is, sir, but the only way one would have a definitive situation if there were either two things would occur, that either the council compulsory purchased them, but they could only do that once they'd proved that they were not being occupied by gypsies and travellers, or that there was some enforcement process by which they suddenly became available. But the problem with the latter, is that the council couldn't then themselves dedicate those to supply. That would be a matter for those individuals, and there's no guarantee that those individuals would add them towards the supply. So at present time, it's totally premature to suggest that those should be counted towards supply.
And do you take the same view, Mr. Masters, in respect of the PDA?
Yes.
And you do as well, Mr. Cook?
Well, I don't know what information they've got on the enforcement file in respect of breach of condition notices, and it's unevidenced. I hear what Mr. Jarman says,
Yes.
that there are people who are non-travellers, but I'm not prepared to accept the extent of it when it's unevidenced. No disclosure.
And I know Mr. Lintott said yesterday, well, we should have asked for the enforcement reports beforehand if we wanted to see them. But I did put in my evidence that there is no evidence apart from, oh yes, they're not gypsies and travellers, and we served a breach of condition notice. Simple as that.
So the appellants dispute the 28.
We don't accept it's been evidence before you
Yes.
that there are that many.
Apart from what was said in response to my questions to the appellants themselves about who is on Lidgy Park, do the appellants have any other evidence to the contrary in terms of occupancy?
We haven't gone round, Mr. Woods hasn't gone round all the sites.
Yeah, I'm well aware of your reservations. I just wanted to check that position. So, right. So nothing from you, Mr. Woods, in terms of.
Well, I've not been around, so I've got no statutory right of entry to.
No, I understand that. I just
to
wanted
the property, so
I
it's
just want to put
difficult.
the question to you and see what the answer is. What about the documentation that's been put in by the local planning authority, and I think also by the parish councils, where they've copied quite a large number of advertisements for mobile homes being available for general rent on Lidgy Park? What is your response to that?
Well, our primary response in the High Court, where we dealt with this, where the High Court found it wasn't available for us. So that's the separate question. It didn't mean that those were pictures that we could take. And my client, Mr. Simon Doherty, has explained very clearly that he has looked and he has asked and found no response where he could go. And he wouldn't mind going there if there was the availability that was offered to him, but there isn't.
So I'm just going to say the mere fact that a mobile home is advertised for rent.
Yes.
And I don't know how many there are, and I don't know the circumstances
Yes.
for that. Doesn't include those sites. The owner of the property who's renting them in accordance with any planning permissions. I don't know, because one would have to look whether or not those were personal permissions, and I don't think most of the Lydia Park sites were personal permissions, but I'd have to check, or whether they were open permissions for renting to any gypsy or traveller in need. And then, so the mere fact that that's what I was saying, the mere fact that sites have been rented on that site doesn't prove anything in terms of occupation by gypsies and travellers, one way or another. And a close analysis would have to be made of what the planning consent was. As I said, if it was personal, the fact that they were occupied for rent might be a breach of that condition. But it wouldn't necessarily mean it still wasn't being occupied by a gypsy and traveller. But secondly, if it was general, then again, the mere fact that they were offered for rent wouldn't make any difference. I mean, one would presume, as one should, that the owner was therefore only renting them to appropriate people who met the condition.
There's also the question of whether it's realistic and available now, because from enforcement processes can take a while.
Yes.
But if a breach of condition notice was defended on the basis that from day one it was never implemented, so we're not in breach of any condition, quite an interesting defence.
Well, that's an important point, sir. Some of the Lydia Park sites go back 30 years. And so if there's been a breach for the last 10 years, then it's immune. And the defence would be, well, it's now become a mobile home site. Council haven't examined any of these problems, presented that to you at all, and that would be the analysis you'd have to go through. So we don't know. I'm sorry, let me just say, we don't know in relation to these advertised sites,
Yes.
which sites they are, what the condition originally was, when the sites were granted, how many years.
But the evidence that's been put into me indicates that they are sites on Lidgy Park.
Yes.
You're not disputing that?
No, sir, but
and they don't mention restrictions in terms of either traveller occupancy or personal permissions. Indeed, if there were personal permissions, one would wonder why they were being advertised.
Well, indeed, sir. So they're unrestricted sites, but presumably 30 years ago, when I got the first of those sites passed, it would have had a gypsy and traveller condition. But if for the last, say, 10 years, I
understand the point you're making.
That's been breached, then any enforcement exercise is going to fail. And it's going to fail, if I may say so, because this council has not safeguarded the position of keeping those sites to gypsies and travellers over the last 10 years. So it would have been another failure of policy and by this council, not for anything the gypsy and travelling community has done. So you'd have to ask how many years, if this has been going on, the council known about it and taken no action. And what action are they now taking? So none of this, sir, is something that's going to be likely to be determined within a 5-year period, because of course, if there is enforcement action, and the defence is ground D, that's going to have to follow through.
So Inspector, if I could
Yes,
say.
I was going to
so-
come to either
thank you.
yourself or Mr. Jarman now.
Well, so Mr. Jarman may have separate points to make, but to deal with the two separate components that we're talking about,
Yes,
the 28 to start with, and then the PDA.
yes, please. Yeah.
You need to keep in mind, Inspector, what the test is in relation to the 28. And the test in relation to footnote 4 is that sites with planning permission should be considered deliverable until permission expires, unless there is clear evidence that schemes will not be implemented within 5 years. And so in respect of those 28 and whether they are deliverable, they plainly are deliverable.
All have planning permission.
All have planning permission and they've been implemented. So in terms of whether the second part doesn't bite, they also are dealt with in Mr. Jarman's January statement, because these sites are the same sites in the main that Inspector Willows looked at when finding that there was a 5-year supply in his decision, as Mr. Jarman explains there. So to my mind, there's no question that those 28 count. The question for you is, well, is there evidence there to suggest that they're being occupied by people who are not gypsies and travellers? Because if obviously all those 28 were being occupied by gypsies and travellers, then there wouldn't be any surplus to count towards.
They won't count towards the current need.
Absolutely. And that's a matter of evidence, but it is a matter for the best evidence. And I do rely upon the evidence that's put in within Mr. Ward's evidence and Mr. Jarman's evidence, and the complete absence of evidence to the contrary. So you've got to make a decision on that and look at it. Look at, for example, the pages and pages and pages of documents in CW8 where pitch after pitch is being put on the open market for rent, generally to people for a sum. And you need to apply your mind to whether or not that is good evidence, as Mr. Ward says, that those sites in the specific, that corroborates what Mr. Jarman has found when he's interviewed these people, that they are not gypsies and travellers, or whether there's an element of doubt on that. That's the question in respect of the 28. In respect of the PDA, the test is different, because it's not suggested the PDA sites have got permission. We're in the first part of footnote 4, and therefore we're looking at whether there's a realistic prospect that development will be delivered on the site within 5 years. And to flip that on its head, what you're looking at, is it unreal in circumstances where you've got people who've been approached specifically by Mr. Jarman, and they have said, yes, we want to have these pictures on here. They're to house the people who are living on here already or who might be coming back. They're available for those people, with the exception of the two at the Willows, which we talked about previously. Is it unreal that those sites are going to be delivered on the site within 5 years? And that's the test which one looks at for the PDA sites. And really, the council puts it as being extremely important that those sites are looking at an intensification of use for people who are already in the main living on the site, so the need is generated by those sites as being a relevant consideration for that question. So those are the two questions that the council puts it, and you look at them in that way, and the different arms of footnote 4.
So not quite.
Hang on, Mr. Masters.
Yeah.
I just want to pick up on what Mr. Lintott said with Mr. Jarman. Mr. Jarman, in terms of the first point in relation to the 28, the sites on Lydia Park, I just want to be clear as to where I go to for the local planning authority's evidence.
To the what, sorry, sir?
I just want to be clear as to where I go to for the local planning authority's evidence on the 28, the sites with the implemented planning permissions.
It's in multiple places, but the easiest place I can find it is page 4 of my January supplementary statement, page 4 and 5. And interestingly enough, when you're looking
Is it the table?
The table, yes. Mr. Masters said that there's sites on there that have been there for more than 30 years. Maybe, and I'm not doubting that, but I think the earliest planning permission we've got on the 15 sites that we felt contributed towards that 28 is 2017. But I think the 30-year one is what I would call Lydia Park, the old bit at the bottom, which obviously has been there for a long, long time.
Yes. So that identifies that. Well, hang on, I've just got one more question, Mr. Cottle. The 28 are identified in that table. We've dealt with the clarification on the column. The information that I've got, including from Mr. Ward, as to advertising for people to come to these sites. Is there anything that relates those adverts to these sites? I know they give indications of what people are doing with sites on Lidgy Park, but in terms of linking across to the ones that you've identified.
I've seen nothing, sir. For
Well,
instance, I've also seen nothing in
Okay.
evidence
Yeah,
because
well, let me hear what Mr. Jarman
Okay.
says. Mr. Ward.
I can't come in on the microphone, so I'll speak.
Sorry, I'll turn.
The original CW16A or CW16, I think, which preceded it, is a bulkier document because it includes with it a number of the rental adverts. And those rental adverts are identified where possible to the specific sites. I can turn up a copy if need be. I thought we dealt with that at the last session, basically.
What I wanted to ask was, is there a means for me to cross-reference between the adverts and this schedule in Mr. Jarman's statement? Are you indicating that there is?
In either 16 or 16A, and I've forgotten which now, I've gone through it pitch by pitch or parcel of land by parcel of land and included the adverts which can be identified to that parcel of land or to that planning permission. And in some cases, there's a photograph of the actual caravan that's being advertised. Now, that's not so for every single plot because it's simply not practical.
Mr. Cottle, I think you wanted to come in.
I don't correlate the number of adverts with the number of occupiers. The latter doesn't follow from the former. The fact that there are adverts doesn't mean that there are that number of occupiers. But more importantly, on footnote 4, when it talks about realistic prospect, it's subject to the enforcement process. And we haven't got any evidence from a planning authority about the enforcement process or the evidence that they're basing it on.
But that's the point I wanted to make. If you look at, I mean, you've got to exercise footnote 4 with some common sense. The first part of it's quite clear. To be considered deliverable, sites will be available now. Well, just pause there. I mean, if these sites are occupied, they're not available now. Offer a suitable location of development and be achievable within a realistic prospect development will be delivered within 5 years. Well, you'd ask yourself a question as well, how long is the enforcement process? But the learned friend wants to ignore all that and just go to the second part saying sites with planning permission should be considered deliverable unless permission expires. But pause there, you have to read into that. But that's really referring to sites with planning permission that haven't yet been occupied or developed. It's not talking about sites currently with planning permission that are occupied. Because that would be a completely unreasonable interpretation of what that was trying to achieve. And so we then come back to, and so I haven't seen, I say to you again, I haven't seen any evidence of correlation between adverts, sites, which sites, what planning permissions.
Okay, Ms. Masters, I'm hurrying you along because you've heard what Mr. Ward
can I
said
just
in
come in,
relation
sir?
to that. Mr. Woods.
Very brief. Thank you very
Yes.
much, sir. We've seen the evidence relating to some adverts.
Yes.
Just because something is advertised doesn't mean to say that someone comes along, a non-traveller, and occupies a particular mobile home. There's no evidence relating to that.
Well, that's where I'm going next, Mr. Woods.
Okay, sir.
So I'm back to Mr. Jarman and just want to check, Mr. I think you've alluded to this already, but in terms of the 28 and their current status as the local planning authority sees it, I think you said earlier that information came from the interviews and knowledge on the site, but I just want to be absolutely clear I've got the full picture from the local planning authority on that.
Yeah, I've just done a very quick totting up. There were a total of 15 sites where pitches contributed towards those 28.
Let me just get it on. So 28 are on 15 sites.
According to my table, and this is the one in my supplementary statement, those 15 sites have planning permission for 54 pitches,
Yes, that's also in the table, yeah.
all of which is understood to be implemented. On those 15 sites and 54 pitches,
Yes.
my quick adding up is that there were 9 travellers living on pitches on those sites.
9 travellers as individuals or families?
9 traveller families, 9 traveller households. So nine of those 54 pitches were occupied by travellers. And then this is where Mr. Ward's maths comes in terms of working out what else was available to conclude the 28. Is the available supply. No, sorry, there.
I don't think Mr. Hang on,
No,
Mr. Masters.
I'm trying to
I
do
don't
this
think
on the
Mr.
hoof,
Jarman's
Mr.
finished, and then you can
Masters.
come in.
I'm basically trying to do this on the hoof in that there's 15 sites with 54 pitches that have got permission, of which 28 are not occupied by travellers. But as Mr. Cottle pointed out earlier, there's a lot more than 28 non-travellers living on those 28 pitches. Or that some of them are vacant.
Simple question. Given evidence still on the things based on that, there are 54 pitches, 28 which are not occupied by travellers, so it means the rest are occupied by travellers. Well, that's who are they helping? Otherwise, it would be more than 28. That's the only so far. But there's something to say. Oh, actually, it's 40.
So-
on the hoop, it's now suddenly 40. It wouldn't be 40, would it? It's actually 45. The line is 54 is 45. You now say it's something 45.
No, I'm not.
No, let's.
I haven't finished.
So, but in terms of, I think, Alan, that it's unfortunate, but the heading of that table, as we discussed with the inspector at the outset, is not correct. The final type, the right-hand column on pages 4 and 5, that the 28 figure there, that those represent people who, as part of the process of carrying out the GTA and PDA, Mr. Jarman has spoken to, and they have said that they're living on these identified pitches with planning permission that he said there, but they are not gypsies and travellers. So he's directly spoken to those 28, and they've said that, whereas the table approved pitches minus number of vacant pitches or pitches occupied, that appears to give the opposite. So sorry, just let me finish. So let me, yeah, okay, but that's what the table is supposed to show. So the 28.
Mr. Masters, let me hear what you can. I'll
got
give
to
you
let
all an
people finish
opportunity,
talking.
but
So that's what the 28 is. The 28, and that ties in with the provisions within the GTAA. So Mr. Masters, the council's evidence is Mr. Masters, that Mr. Jarman has spoken to these 28 people or pitches, and they've said that they're not gypsies and travellers. But there are 54 pitches in total, and so therefore that's the basis of that table. In respect, Inspector, of the adverts, that's really seen as being corroboratory evidence of that in Mr. Ward's CW16A, which came in with his supplementary proof of evidence, where you'll see that there is a whole range of sites dealt with by planning permission number, where he's imposed within each, or many of them. For example, on page 7 of 22, we've got the adverts that relate to the particular pitch that he's dealing with at the particular site he's dealing with in that page of the appendix. So you'll see as you go through advert for 2-bed mobile home, advert for 3 mobile home relating to that particular site that's been dealt with on page 7, which is 2020-1866. And if you turn over the page, you get to the next one, and you turn over the page, you get to the next one on page 11. And so you've got a number of adverts relating to a number of those sites. But the council doesn't just rely upon the adverts. The council relies upon the interviews of Mr. Jarman to demonstrate that these people he's identifying have identified themselves as not being gypsies and travellers. That's the council's position.
just one moment, Mr. Masters. Mr. Jarman, in respect of how you got the information in terms of the interviews, can you just sort of enlarge on that about the interviews on these sites. I think there's reference to some of the sites being vacant. So is some of the information, is it indirect, an element of it, or is it all direct?
It's all direct.
It's all direct.
We work with the council to determine precisely which parcel of land referred to what planning application.
Yes,
We visited the site.
yes,
Where we were able to identify travellers living there, they were interviewed.
yeah,
Where we were able to identify that there were non-travellers also living on parts of that site, they were spoken to, not interviewed. We didn't interview non-travellers. And they confirmed that they were non-travellers living there. And by inference, renting the pictures.
yes,
So those pictures, and this is why I said there's a difference. There may be a site that's got 4 pictures, 2 were travellers interviewed, 2 were included as supply, but I think there's one case, there's 14 non-travellers living across those 2 pictures, but we've only included the 2 that have permission, counting towards the 28. So this is all first-hand information.
and are some of them vacant?
Some of them are vacant as well, hence.
And is that just recorded by observation, or?
Yes. That was the 3rd point of my maths on the hoof that I haven't quite got to, that there is a difference between interviews, pictures, because there's also vacancies on there.
On the maths on the hoof point, we know from the GTAA that there are up to 30% of traveller households are single persons, and Mr. Masters was making the point that actually there are those who can't afford their own land, can't get a pitch on a council site because they haven't got medical need perhaps, and do rent caravans. And the fact that something is out to rent doesn't mean that a non-traveller would take it up. It could be a traveller. And what Mr. Jarman said just a moment ago is that of the 54, there were 9 travellers. And I didn't read that from the GTA. I haven't read it anywhere. So I'm presuming that's another bit of information that's come from the mathematics on the hoof. But surely if you go to a pitch and there are a number of caravans there and there are single men, you could mistake surely when you've got serried ranks of caravans, as we have shown in CW16, where they're all very close together, that the person who's the owner of the site or is interviewed and is simply wrong about the number of households.
So the question of the robustness of this arises, and in reality, what you have is this: you have the interviewer, whoever they are, making a decision as to whether somebody is a traveller or not. And then, as Mr. Jarman has just said, if they're not travellers, they don't actually interview them at all, because they don't interview travellers. They don't interview people who are non-travellers. But the reality of that, as we pointed out to you before, is that the definition is now very wide.
Yes.
If this person is making a cultural or an ethnic interpretation, which is probably what they've done, okay, they will miss people who have a tradition of living in caravans and have done for a number of years. And how long do you need to live in a caravan to have a tradition of living in a caravan? I would have thought 3 or 4 years would be more than sufficient for you to therefore qualify as a new age traveller or for a person who lives in there. Secondly, the mere fact that the sites are advertised doesn't prove anything in terms of who's occupying them.
Well, that point's just been made.
Yeah, I know, but I'm sorry.
I've got an eye on the time as well.
Yeah, I know, but just for robustness, there are real questions about this. First of all, there is no questionnaire that deals with, as has already been pointed out, the new definition and the question. So if you do a filter, which is what they do, very quick filter right at the beginning, are you a gypsy or traveller, and take a view they're not, and then you make the mistake there, there's no way of rectifying that. And then we come back to the overall point is, okay, you suspect that some of these sites are not occupied by people who currently meet the definition. What have you done about that? And what's the realistic timetable for doing anything about that? To make those sites available. And then we get into all sorts of problems about that, because even if you enforce against those sites, doesn't make them available.
Yeah.
Secondly, is there any evidence that the council are going to CPO those sites to turn them back and do that? No, because the council don't have the money. So we don't get don't get close to a 5-year supply. What we get is there may or may not be a problem. There may or may not be sites that should be available, but how do you achieve that availability?
Yes, well, we're going back
Yeah.
over old ground. Mr. Jarman, just one question for you arising from this. In terms of interpretation, whether or not the traveller household on the site, do you know how that view is reached? Is there a checklist, for example?
We asked them and they say, we're not gypsies, we're not travellers, we're just renting pictures. Very simple.
So a new age traveller would say that. They wouldn't say, "Oh, actually, I know what the definition. I've been in caravan for some time." A lot of people will not identify as travellers, but doesn't mean they won't meet the definition.
Let me.
Mr. Linton, I think you wanted to come in.
Well, I was just, yes, we sort of merged into your item 4, Inspector, without really introducing it. So, I thought that I ought to just make it clear that you will have noticed in the final ID 22 document that you asked for, that the 59 that's given for the approved pictures at Lydia Park is different from the 54 pictures that is discussed in the evidence of Mr. Ward on page 24 of his CW 16B, and in the table we've looked at for Mr. Jarman. And I just wanted to ensure that you'd seen and understood that that's because there's an additional pitch at Ranch Park that's been granted permission, which takes the total from 54 to 59. So that's the explanation for that. For 5 pitches, yeah.
Sorry, you said it's an additional pitch. I was at the additional planning.
Sorry, yeah. So that's right, yeah. So that explains why the supply is actually 5 more than is identified in the other documents, because there's that one additional permission, Inspector. So your numbers all add up.
I can't help making the point, maybe you wanted to get to it later, is that if they're proposing the intensification of Lydia Park in this way, it does undermine the weight that they invite you to attach to that as a reason for refusing permission in this case. And if they're proposing to intensify Lydia Park in this way, it does undermine the reason that they're inviting you to refuse these appeals, because of the concern over flooding at the junction with Stovolds Hill.
Well, that is a submission point, and it's plainly wrong in my respectful submission, but I'll leave that to submissions.
What I would like to come to next, we want to wind this session up for the Germans now. It's the PDA. Well, that I've got quite detailed representation of Mr. Woods on behalf of this on a site-by-site basis, and detailed response from Mr. Jarman. So there's no need to go into detail. However, there are specific points that we want to make sure if you want to make sure that the specific points need to be aired and discussed, if there are queries, concerns that remain, I'd like to hear those now, and perhaps I should come to the appellants first on this.
One of the points that I'm concerned about is, for example, I think there's one at Ellen's Green that my own friend my own friend Mr. Lintott is very familiar with, because we fought it out at Pollingford Place, Ellen's Green.
Pollingford Place.
Right underneath the national landscape. And local planning authority were fighting it tooth and nail over landscape impact. And of course, all these sites at Lydia Park are regarded as having no impact on the landscape whatsoever. Whereas you're going to be invited to go on a walk where you will see all these permissions that have been granted at Lydia Park very clearly. And that wasn't counted as a reason in this PDA at all. There's just a blank on landscape. And I find it very difficult to understand how they don't regard landscape as a factor And indeed, there was no landscaping conditions on the permissions that were granted in the middle of Lydia Park, as I understand it. Perhaps there were lighting conditions on the most recent ones, but they haven't.
Sorry,
been...
I thought your comment was about Pollingford Place.
Well, Pollingford Place is right underneath the national landscape.
Yes.
And the planning authority were fighting it tooth and nail.
Yes.
On the impact on landscape.
I've got that
and
note
in the PDA, there's no landscape effect that's taken into account at all.
Yes.
And I just find that very surprising, where they are so concerned to have what they say a cordon sanitaire around the fringes of every national landscape that for a strategic purpose should be kept clear of development. That seems to be their case. And
the answer to that, Inspector, as you will have seen, is within Mr. Jarman's 46 to 52 of his statement, where of his May 2026 April, where he deals with that. In terms of the degree of impact, and that's a matter for submissions on the landscape case.
The other point that I picked up from the PDA is that there does seem to be a lot of cut and paste in it, because in the final appraisals, they seem to have a row that says, is it achievable to accommodate any additional gypsy and traveller pitches on the site? And the answer is always, there's a reasonable prospect that development could take place in the future. And that argument that there's a reasonable prospect that development could take place in the future is in every case, even when it's read, and they accept that there can be no prospect. So we're wondering what else is cut and paste when they've always got that answer, which is erroneous, clearly erroneous.
Mr. Masters, then, have you any PDA points?
I do, so first of all, I'd like to ask a question. What's the status of the PTA? Has this passed any resolution of the council?
Sorry, I can't answer that. It's a council document. I think it's been accepted as local plan evidence base without needing to go through any resolution.
Is there any resolution of the council at any supplemental planning policy document that attaches with the PDA?
I think the issue here, Mr. Masters, is this is local plan evidence and doesn't need to go through any of those formal processes.
Well, sorry. So for the moment, I'm getting it's gone through no formal processes. Is that right?
No, what I'm saying is that if it's being accepted as local plan evidence base, it wouldn't need to, but I don't know what the council's processes
Well, Mr. Ward,
are.
you're there. You're speaking for the council. You're being silent on this. Perhaps you could help.
I don't know emphatically. I did ask the question. It's not been reported to a planning committee, but I'm told that would not normally be practice anyway. I'm told it has been considered by the council's executive.
So considered
by the council's executive or executive member for planning. Sadly, I can't tell you how the executive at Waverley is structured.
So what we know is it hasn't been formally adopted by a resolution of the authority.
I don't think we do know that.
Well, we've just been told, we've been told that there's no such formal resolution or adoption.
No. What Mr. Ward said, it hasn't been to the committee, but it's been considered by the executive of the council.
Yeah, but not by the council itself, not formally adopted as a resolution of the council.
We simply don't know. I haven't been told that, Mr. Masters.
Well, sorry.
My understanding is it's simply been reported as an information document
rather
than specifically adopted.
Right, thank you.
So it's not adopted. It's not an allocation. There are no planning permissions currently with any of them. There's no resolution to compulsory purchase. There's no guarantee that any planning permissions will come forward. There's no evidence from any owners that they're willing for these sites to go forward or for them to submit planning permissions. There's no mechanism by which those sites can be guaranteed to be delivered and be available. And so we already know, I'm not going to go into it in any detail because you don't wait, but we say that you just have to compare the flood issues raised here in relation to this site with the flood issues relating to all of those sites to see that the council can't have it both ways. They can't have the cake and eat it. Resist this site on flood issues and ignore the flood issues relating to those sites.
Okay, thanks.
And then, so there is policy DM 37, and although it suggested, well, there can be a mitigation of DM37 because these will be in family ownership. We don't know that, but that would mean those sites would then be personal permissions, which wouldn't contribute to supply because they would be personal permissions.
Thank you, Mr. Masters. Mr. Jarman, do you want to come back on the PDA at all?
I just wanted to come back on that final point that Mr. Masters made, and I think it's somewhere in my evidence where Inspector in Waverley categorically found that personal permissions can contribute towards supply. So, no, that was Burnt Hill, wasn't it? No, probably place a different place. One of the sites on Plaistow Road.
Sorry,
so
which one?
I'm just trying to find it in my evidence.
Sure, yeah.
So Inspector, the sites are both identified by Inspector Willows in his decision.
Willows, right,
There's
okay.
2 sites in Waverley which both have personal permissions, which Inspector Willows specifically said counted towards the supply. So you've got that in CW 16, I think.
Right, thank you.
And it's also on page 4 of my supplementary statement, under
Thank you.
paragraph 9, bullet point 70. I think to go back to the fundamental issues with the PDA, we could talk about this all week. Don't want to, and I know you don't want to, but the principle of the PDA is to seek to demonstrate whether or not sites will be able to deliver additional pictures that meet the 3 paragraph footnote 4 deliverability test. So first one, are they available? Yes, they're already existing sites. Secondly, are they suitable? Having gone through the exercise in the matrices, essentially the council have, without prejudice, carried out a pre-application appraisal for each of these sites, and in determining which were red and which were green, have determined the red ones in principle are suitable for development. And then the third point is there a realistic prospect that these sites will be delivered within 5 years? We've asked the site owners and all of them, bar 2 pictures, have said yes. Now, I understand that still needs to go through further processes of sorts, but to me, it provides a far stronger base of evidence to support the deliverability of these pictures than a simple local plan allocation for X pictures on a strategic housing site, because we have provided evidence to support those 3 main tests.
We'd say you have no confidence in the pre-application process that Mark Decane, Inspector Decane, dealt with in detail as the impact on the national landscape at Pollingford Place, where the council is giving it a green. And we know from all the local residents that Mr. Lintott will confirm, who objected to that site at Ellen's Green and its expansion by the permission in 2018, that it's right at the foot of the national landscape. You're absolutely on top of the site when you go up the hill behind it. You could include it in your site visit to see the point. And yet the planning authority are putting it forward as green when you know it was even objected to on the basis of domination in that case. So there's going to be a lot of opposition to that site, and when you put it forward without being consulted on, it's not a robust basis.
Which site was that, Mr. Cottle?
Pollingford Place,
Pollingford
Ellen's
Place.
Green.
Yeah.
So going back to a point Mr. Was just made, there is no evidence I have seen from any site owner that they are planning to make a planning application in relation to an extension of their sites. Again, this comes down to, oh, we've discussed it with them, but there's no tangible evidence. Mr. Jarman has said similar things in Tandridge. And in that instance, residents have turned up at planning inquiries in Tandridge and said that's not right. This hasn't occurred. We haven't been contacted. We haven't been asked, and we would refuse it for all sorts of reasons.
That's not my recollection of what happened.
Sorry?
I don't agree with that as a description of what happened at Tanbridge.
Well, I'm sorry. I was there, Mr. I'm
Okay.
sure.
Yeah,
I've heard what you've
related to one site. You weren't there, Mr. Lintott. So that was Green Lane.
Yep.
What do you mean?
Residents turned up relating to Green Lane and said we never knew about these allocations in this road. It wasn't relating to the appeal side, but it was relating to sites that were opposite. We never knew about it. We wouldn't have wanted those sites to be here.
Well, it's not for me to give evidence, but I would say that you should put very limited weight on anything you hear about another inquiry. But I represented throughout that inquiry, and I don't recall any residents coming in saying.
Well, that's the point. That's the point, Mr.
You didn't represent.
You didn't.
That's
You weren't
wrong
there.
in relating to Alwyn in Green Lane.
Oh, right. So you're not talking about the
No.
We're talking about the residents
that.
that turned up related to that site there, and the site's been allocated in the PDA that were opposite that site, and the residents said, we don't know anything about that. There's over domination of sites in this area. We don't want any more.
I'm
We haven't been consulted on it.
Mr. Wood, the site was called, the site that you're talking about was what?
Talking about Alwyn in Green Lane.
Alwyn Green Lane.
Tandridge is the.
It's Handridge. It's one of the appendices, sir.
So if you look at the appendices, you'll find no less than 4 appeal decisions
Yes,
recently.
I just want to identify it, that's
Yeah,
all.
but all of which have rejected
Yes,
the
I
position.
understand.
But so can I just make a point?
I do want to
Mr.
wind this up now.
I know,
Yeah.
so very quickly, Mr. Lintoff said, oh, well, I'm giving evidence I don't want to, and that he could therefore say that applies to me. The point, sir, is that, well, where is the evidence of these landowners consenting to this? What you have is anecdotal evidence from Mr. Jarman. You have anecdotal evidence from Mr. Jarman on everything, but no actual evidence.
Could I just say that there's a shocking similarity between that case in Tandridge and the locals not knowing, and the council in this case not knowing about the profound intensification that this council are proposing at Lydia Park of caravan pitches. And it's a shocking thing. The other point is that the Pollingford Place is Appendix 6, I think, to the design and access statement, or the first appeal statement on WS planning. So that decision of Inspector Decane is before you, and you also have heavy reliance by the planning authority on the Burnt Hill decision, whereas in fact Miss Temple on behalf of Temple Planning agreed matters. There was no contest over the issues that we're raising today.
Inspector, I want to just come back specifically. I'm conscious of the time, but in respect of the test, in my respectful submission, Mr. Jarman has adequately laid that out, looking at the 3 stages, whether it's available, whether it's suitable, whether there's realistic prospect within 5 years, and that's the test you're looking at. You're not looking at certainty. Or whether or not somebody's indicated they're going to put in a planning application. You're looking at a realistic prospect within 5 years. So that answers my learned friend's point in that respect. In respect of Pollingfold, well, you do have the detailed evidence. I know my learned friend keeps going back to that, but you have the detailed evidence on that within the statement itself. And you've got at paragraph 52, for example, the inspector's decision makes it clear that the harm identified arose from the initial introduction of caravans into a valued landscape, not from the absolute number of pitches. Crucially, the inspector also found that the site's immediate surroundings are not characteristic of the wider landscape. These are all broader landscape concerns, but the crucial point is it could not possibly be suggested that in the context of Pollingford Place that already has pitches is looking to intensify, and given the work that's been done, it's unrealistic for you to say that in 5 years there will be additional development there. And you can look at what's written in Pollingford Place as a decision. You can look at the statement from May 2026, and you can form that view. But that is the test, and that's the council's
Okay,
submission.
thank you.
So I'd like
Well,
to come back on.
I don't think it is the test, sir. What Mr. Lintott is referring to is if it's an allocation. These are not allocations. It's a document that's not been forward for public consultation. It's not been through the local plan process.
I know,
And so
I've heard that
different
already,
test
Mr. Watts.
applies.
So could I make a point that still?
Is it a new point, Mr. Master?
Yes, it is, sir. It's in relation to what Mr. Ward said about the PDA being part of a local plan process. But what local plan process, sir? Because this council won't exist next May. And at the moment, so there's a real uncertainty about how the longevity of the PDA in any event. It won't last very much beyond March and April of next year. And then there's a document, because it's not an allocation, it's not an approved policy, it's not a document that's going to last going forward. Without that status, sir, it's nothing in reality, but
I think-
an aspirational
I think, Mr.
document.
Masters, there's speculation there because you, neither you nor I nor anybody else knows what will happen with the new authority.
What we do know about the new authority is that the elected members of the new authority will be right now in committee determining what policies are going to go forward. But this isn't a policy that comes into that category. So it's not it's not a local plan policy that has any longevity because it's not a local plan policy. The most it is, the way that Mr. Ward just put it in a moment, it's a document that goes to a local plan process, but a local plan process that doesn't exist and will never exist. So it's not a document that has any legs.
Right. Okay.
Well, I suppose, sorry, I don't want to have tit and tat, but
No.
what's the alternative then? We go back to the previous GTAA and the allocations in the plan when it's obvious that there's a 5-year supply. If you go back to that, the point of the GTA is to update the situation, and all it can do is within the context of what's happening at the moment. It's to document the paragraphs 9 and 10 of the PTS, and it serves that purpose. It doesn't have to be a development plan document. In my submission, it'd be rather surprising if it were, and submissions can be made upon its effect, but it's the only figure that we've got.
It's a document that bypasses the statutory processes. It's a completely irregular process. ORS recommended to the authority that they went down this route, and the authority were wrong. What they should have done is got the GTAA and then reviewed the situation and then gone down as they did. They put the GTA process into abeyance because they wanted to hold it back in order to bring it in line with new plan formula.
I've got your views on that.
It bypasses the statutory process.
I'm quite clear that there's no meeting of minds on this. Thank you for your comments. Before I wind up, Councillor Stern, anything you wish to add at all?
Can I just make a statement in line with my submission 2 years ago?
Councillor Stern, you just press the button in the centre. That's it.
Sorry, thank you, Inspector. I'd just like to make a statement in line with my original submission of 2 years ago. Is that Bramley Parish Council's primary concern is the dominance of the traveller settlement at Lydia Park over the surrounding communities. And looking at the most recent data which comes out of the ONS, if you look at the growth of caravans in Waverley, in the year to July 2024, the growth rate was 33.2%. And in the year to July 2025, the growth rate was another 18.4%.
What was your first figure?
33.2%.
And when was that?
This was July 23 to July 24.
Right.
And this is the caravan count that's available on the ONS website. I think it comes off the Department for whatever Levelling Up is now called as well.
Yes.
So now, according to July 2025, there were 432 caravans in Waverley. But it's the growth rate that's worrying, because Lydia Park has been expanding at a phenomenal rate since the first 20 whatever sites were first allowed in 1989 or whenever it was. And I cannot see how this growth can continue without encroaching on the rest of the AGLV Greenbelt wonderful landscape that surrounds the existing park.
Okay, Councillor, so I'm going to interrupt. I'm sorry to cut you short, but I don't really want to go over ground that we've covered elsewhere, because we've sort of divided this inquiry into particular topics.
Yeah.
The ones you're talking about, we have done quite thoroughly. So I'm really looking to see if you've got any comments you want to make about the general need, any views on that for gypsy and traveller accommodation, not matters such as landscape.
Perhaps we could just ask the council if she agrees that in Lydia Park should have a lot more caravans as the council proposes.
No, Mr.
I could say I am disappointed that so much of the traveller population in Waverley is located where it is. But a lot of social concerns have come out of this inquiry, not least is that we still have travellers under the age of 40 who still can't read and write. And I've encountered youngsters who've left school at the age of 13 who think they're educated because they read and write. And I've tested them on their times table and they cannot even answer a simple 5 by 5. They think they can do everything with their computers and their AI. Education for the traveller community to enable them to integrate with the wider community is really important. And I think this is something that Waverley needs to be concerned with.
And in terms of need for accommodation, is there anything you want to say on that? That's what I've really got to press.
I can't really add to it. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor, thank you very much.
Councillor, are you pro the expansion of Lydia Park?
Councillor Stone's already dealt with that in a remarks a few moments ago.
I think the nod is no.
Right. Mr. Ward.
I don't want to go back on anything. It's simply something I did as an exercise, and it may or may not be helpful to people. But in going through 16B, I've said most of the data comes from the GTAA. That obviously uses a different referencing system. If it's helpful to you, I can go through each of the pitches quickly and give you the reference from the GTAA so you can match those details up. If that's not helpful to you, I'm not worried.
It's not helpful in terms of inquiry time, Mr. Ward. I mean, cross-referencing may be useful if it's a factual exercise, which I don't have before me. I've no objection to you putting that in as an annotated document, provided you agree with Mr. Woods.
The only relevance really is that some of the expansions that we're proposing went outside the boundaries shown by the district land registry entries for the site. So they're actually proposing something that's encroaching on land that's not within the pitch, and so therefore it's impossible.
Well, in respect to that point, it's the permission that is important. So if you've got multiple landowners, if there was a case where it overlapped with the edge of a different land registry title, that wouldn't interfere at all with the planning permission. It would just mean that you've got multiple landowners that would be dealing with that particular pitch on permission.
But how?
The point is, they're nothing to do with the site owners. They've expanded onto somebody else's land, and the council are proposing more units on there, and they don't own it.
Yeah, Mr. Gottle's made the point. Mr. Ward, as I said, I'm happy if you want to put in a document which deals with that point, if you can agree with Mr. Woods. But I don't want to go through.
Thank you, sir.
I don't want to go through.
I'll quickly prepare a simple table with those details, and if
Yeah.
Mr. Woods is happy with it, we can give it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to have limited time today to do that, sir, because I'll be giving evidence next. So I can't really.
I'm not asking for you to do it now.
No, okay.
And if it's a factual document, I see no reason why it can't come in after the inquiry is closed. But I don't want to use inquiry time to go through a schedule. I'd like to draw this session to a close now, but before I do, can I just check that you've all made the substantive points that you wish to in terms of updating the general need?
Yes, sir.
Good, thank you, Mr. Cottle.
Thank you.
Yes, it's
Good, thank you very much. Right, well, just a reminder of what's to come this afternoon. We've got the second part of Mr. Wood's evidence. The time estimates I have, Mr. Cottle, was about, Mr. Masters has already asked questions in chief. I think he said, Mr. Cottle, around about half an hour, and I've got an estimate of an hour and a half from Mr. Lintott. So 2 hours with Mr. Woods when we resume, and then conditions. Hopefully we can deal with that within an hour. So I'm assuming an afternoon session of around about 3 hours should bring us up to where we want to be. On that basis, I'm going to suggest we resume at 2 o'clock.
So could I just, before we go,
Yes,
revisit closings? Because I'm increasingly of the view that, particularly with the way that things have gone today and how complicated things are, that we need a little bit more time than we'd have. Particularly with Mr. Cottle wanting to go on the site visit, and I think there's a good reason for that.
well, I've been in a number of site visits where advocates have been present,
Yes,
including yourself.
indeed.
But I have to say, it's not
It's not.
It's not common practice.
No, but in
And-
relation to this site, sir, it's,
Well, Mr. Cottle does have a witness who I assume will be attending the site visit. And I've already given an indication of my view. I do really want to wind things up by tomorrow. I also understand that advocates are not starting their closing submissions for the first time tomorrow. I imagine you'll have a general indication of where you want to go and what ground you want to cover. And you've got.
I would just appreciate a gap where I could bring it all together. It'd be much shorter. I think my submissions might be sort of partly oral rather than written.
I do want written submissions on this case.
Pardon?
I want written submissions on this case.
Well, I would ask for extra time. I don't know whether we can spill over into an extra day, but I do want to accompany you on that site visit.
Well, I mean, my view, as I expressed, hasn't changed, Inspector. I mean, we've known what's been coming. Your views were quite clear as to when the inquiry was going to finish. We've moved things around to enable that. As you say, we're not coming to it for the first time. We know what the submissions need to be. And quite often in an inquiry, one is drafting submissions in respect to the whole inquiry overnight on the day before closing, because that's just the way sometimes it has to happen. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't deliver it as you originally indicated.
so I wonder whether there is any mileage in doing it on Thursday or Friday.
I've made that quite clear. I'm not available Thursday
No.
or Friday. I've got other
No.
things, including a case management conference and another appeal. So
Yes.
that's already set up.
I wonder
I'll-
if you could
I'll
just
drop-
look at your diary just to see
Yes,
if
well,
there's a.
we're eating into the lunch adjournment, Mr. Masters. We'll make definitive arrangements at the end of today, and we'll adjourn now for lunch and resume at 2 o'clock, please.